word is flat, man. Globe is the whole globe. Take it down on shit right now, man. Shit, satellites are not real, man. I think satellites are real, man. I don't even know what to tell you. How about the Eagles and shit, man? They already got it, man. I'm telling you right now, it's all real. All the hopes, man. All the hopes. All the hopes, man. Shout out Eagles. What up, bro? Tim out, man. What up, bro? Yeah, man. Shit. DM up.
All right, join us here live. We're live on YouTube, Twitch, DLive, Odyssey, and Paranormal.radio, as well as a slew of other internet streaming stations. And you can also call in if you like. You can access us on Skype, Infinite Plane Radio, or 505 349 0420. That was Neo Mode, Infinite Gang, bringing us in. The title of tonight's live stream is My Ironic NASA Hoodie, which is really just a minor point. I'm wearing a NASA hoodie, but it's because it was a really good deal at one of these thrift stores or whatever. But it was like originally a $50 hoodie. It's got the moon on the back, and it has all this information about the moon. And I was just thinking about, I really need to emphasize merchandise again like I used to. I think it's a great way to keep the channel going and to keep memes out there in the real world. Whereas they always want to quarantine ideas and box them in so they can later, censor those separate platforms. This has been their agenda the entire time. But what I'm suggesting here is that when we first started this channel, we really worked with using the marketplace for the purposes of spreading the mind virus that we were really intent upon breaking out of the various online echo chambers. That's why we did the billboard. That's why we had the Daredevil and everything else that went into this thing. And again, it was all about breaking out of the metaverse before it was even called that, and having a presence in the meatverse. And so merch is in the meatverse, and we have a lot of great designs, as you all know. You can find us on Amazon and many other places, but I kind of passed it on to these third-party printers, and I want to get more involved anyway, since I have to do a lot of hands-on order fulfillment with this tabloid, the IPS Insider, which is about to start hitting the shelves near your local IPR press representative, because that's how we're going to distribute this tabloid. It's going to be distributed grassroots through our own street team, and that's going to be emerging here very soon. All right, let's see here. I sent out notifications. We're waiting for a few others to show up. Last night's live stream about Obama's blackout got blacked out. We had some kind of a technical issue where the track was split in two, and the new software I use to put it together actually caused the audio to overlap weirdly, and I haven't been able to fix it. So in other words, we're dealing with a lost archive of IPS, and it's the Obama blackout one that got blacked out. So we're going to go ahead and go over some of the things we talked about yesterday to make sure that nobody misses anything. A couple of other things. Elon Musk is suing Media Matters, which is essentially a fake lawsuit. Really, everybody ought to be suing Musk for faking space. That's malfeasance. Think about it. You're talking about money from somebody who's getting, taxpayer money, somebody with government contracts, and the public is being faked out. So if anything, SpaceX ought to be getting sued. But this is all just drama, sort of like you have Milei winning in Argentina, and he goes out there screaming with his hair out like the Ultimate Warrior, and he's like, "We want our goddamn freedom." I'm like, this is the WEF guy, just another World Economic Forum 666 puppet, acting like it's WWE. So yes, WEF is doing the WWE routine because it gets clicks. It's really a fashion show. It's really about the hair. If you want to know who's going to win in the next election, it's the hair. I remember when Boris, is that his name? The guy came out. We see politicians copying each other all the time. And Boris Johnson, I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing. They work for Trump. People are like sheep. Diana South says, last night played on DLive this morning. Interesting. Joined by Pengu33. Hey, if you notice on YouTube, there's a new penguin emoji. It's a blue penguin that is waving. which is kind of strange because I've been doing a lot of artwork with penguins, cyborg penguins that have to do with this production we're working on. And I've been working on these blue penguins. And the local zoo here is about to have what they call blue penguins, which are small penguins, but they're actual penguins from Antarctica or, no, Australia. But they're going to be here soon, and I'll be providing video evidence of that. Just so the animal denialists don't call them fake. Animal denialism was a big thing. I think we cleared the air. I think we fixed it. There were people like, how do you know gorillas don't exist? Like, that's not how you frame an argument. You don't just flip over the status quo with a single statement without at least recognizing how it became established as the status quo. Not that it's always right because it is the status quo, but rather, if you're going to challenge something, you have to bring something more than a little bit of incredulity, which is easy. It's easy to be incredulous if you assess everything in the world from the confines of your basement. I got an interesting message. I read one on one of my Discord servers I go to, where someone was talking about the Morgile, mud flooding, ancient artifacts in Australia from some hotel in America. And I'm like, that is kind of interesting. Like, we live in the age of remote archaeology. Oh, you into archaeology? Yeah, you can just do it from here. Just go online. It's like, wait, that's the opposite of going out there and getting your hands dirty and digging. It's fascinating. It's just so it shows how we're so divorced from reality. And I actually think the mud flood theory is an active measure, part of the liquefaction process, the liquefaction of reality, which we're living through. Welcome to the age of Aquarius. That's what it's all about, the flood. And it's a data dump. It's not wisdom that's pouring on us. I mean, it is, but it's also a lot of other stuff. It's almost like, astrologically speaking, this whole new age concept, the age of Aquarius and the water pouring out representing wisdom, it's almost like that was going to happen. And so the power elite have had to contaminate that. They've had to flood the zone with all kinds of irrelevant information so that even though everything is being revealed, no one's going to be able to arrive at the right conclusions. That's what it looks like to me. And the only people arriving at the correct conclusions are the true skeptics. And most truthers are just not skeptics, and they don't know they're not skeptics. It has to do with your starting point. They've tricked us. It has to do with the screen. If you accept the screen at face value and judge it to be real or fake based on that, you've already fallen for their trap. The screen needs to be the primary place where you first question before you assess what it says. You have to question, is it even presenting enough information to, like, are there loaded questions, for example? That's usually a thing. There's usually a loaded premise hidden within these things where, like, for example, you go to the news and they're talking about, let's say, water on Mars. Well, if you start debating whether or not there's water on Mars, you've already accepted the premise that Mars exists as described by NASA. Vino Barbarino 29 has joined us. Mud flooding from a hotel room. Yeah, remote mud flooding. And hopefully it takes off. Hopefully he gets some traction on TikTok and is able to, pull himself out of that. And maybe even finance a trip to somewhere where he can actually dig and see. I'm all for mud floodology, but I think it needs to be backed with tangible research. It's a dead end. Same thing with the whole flat earth thing. Dead end until somebody goes deep, deep south or somebody goes to check out if there is such a thing as Mount Meru, a 33-mile circumference magnetic island in the middle of everything. There are 33 people in the chat. We have a full raft. We'll be opening up phones here shortly. Shout out to Lord Dorkington. Appreciate the support and everyone else here. Again, we are a self-financed independent media operation, but what we're doing is we're playing upon the existing fracture. What I'm working on here, I believe, is creating a schism. You could look at this as a philosophical movement. It's not political. It's not partisan. This does not end up at a voting booth, which is what Q did. Just led everybody to the voting booth. No, what we're doing here is we're creating a schism so that we can have an oasis of sanity. I'm talking a parallel media, not perpendicular, not antagonistic, but rather parallel. Just kind of like seasteading. Like, you guys have your chaos and your little closed system, and we'll be right outside looking in. But the numbers aren't what they should be. The number of people who are already skeptical but who aren't applying it to media appropriately, um, it's like a sleeping giant, if you ask me. There are so many people who are just one step away from becoming true media skeptics. And my objective here is to blow it up so that they can never silence it, so they can't break it. So this network continues to metastasize. And not just here, but I mean as a bigger, broader trend. I'm talking a real pushback against psychological operations being played on people 24/7, treating us like idiots, clowning people. I mean, we joke and laugh about fake space because it is funny, risible, etc. But the fact of it is, it's a clown show, and we're paying for it. So we have every single right to not only not believe in it, but to criticize it. And I am fomenting a culture of disbelief, which is what the mentalimmunityproject.org is terrified of. And that's because they want the population to have mind aids so they're susceptible to every mass media mind virus they release. And I'm saying, no, I actually have real mind war inoculation. And it begins with the suspension of judgment. And it ends with peace of mind, which I've been enjoying since I figured out how media actually operates. I have not been triggered by any of these ridiculous stories, no matter the body count. I have not been guilt tripped by any of the corpse clingers. Again, corpse clingers is a term I mentioned this yesterday. Again, I'll have to get the archives fixed, but I have an article about corpse clingers, or rather death clingers and corpse clutchers. See, the death clingers are the ones who insist that people are dying in these psyops. You don't have any evidence. Yeah, but the bad guys are so bad there must be at least one dead person. No, no, no. If there's a dead person, then it violates, or rather, it, I guess, eliminates any kind of hold that the NDAs would have on any of the participants. You can't sign a non disclosure agreement to take part in the mass casualty drill presented as real and then still be bound by the NDA if somebody actually dies. Nobody dies. No need to cling to that fear. And when you're clinging to it, what you're actually doing is you're carrying blood for the PSYOP entertainment complex. You're carrying atrocity propaganda for them, and you're saying, hey, look, this is an atrocity. Be afraid. It's like, why are you participating on the other side of the screen? Why are you propagating their propaganda? And then the corpse clutchers are the ones who act offended when you don't believe their body count. Like after Maui got zapped by Godzilla, I was like, I don't believe that any children were incinerated. I don't believe the media is covering it up. And all kinds of corpse clutchers were out there saying, how dare you? There's a bunch of dead kids. I'm like, no, I don't think so. And where are they now? None of them care all of a sudden. Why? Because it's not the current thing. They are current thinkers, which means they don't really care, which is something else to consider. A lot of the people who are hypercritical of auto hoaxers never really seem to advocate for any so called victims unless the media has already pointed them out. Like they do so purely on a reactionary basis, they're not principled about it. All right, let's go ahead and get into this. The ISS is an underwater movie, case closed. Spacewalks are performed underwater. So take a look at this astronaut on a spacewalk and take note of how crystal clear the picture is. Look how far you can see. You can probably see your house. Like, look how clear that is. You can see the earth behind him, you see clouds, you can see the shadows of clouds. This is so clear. I just want to really get this, really note here that the light is everywhere in this picture. There's really no dark spot. I mean, there's some shadows, but no, you can see everything. It's very well lit. Now, let's look at a typical NASA spacewalk video. See how the light diffuses? You have a little hot spot, a little ring, and then it's pitch black all around, and you cannot see very far. So the ISS believers will say, well, that's because this spacewalk is being filmed while it's in the shadow of the Earth. And this will explain the darkness, but it doesn't explain what's called light loss. Light loss refers to the density of water and its effects on light. So the density of water is 800 times higher than that of air. Consequently, the light is absorbed very fast, and this results in dim, monotonous colors, decreased contrast, and the sharpness of the picture is lost. This is from an article about photography. It says, if you're new to underwater photography, you may be frustrated in the beginning. But knowing how water as a medium changes the quality of light will help you improve your pictures. So, in other words, what you're seeing here on this supposed spacewalk is actually very consistent with light diffusion underwater. And it explains why you can't see very far and the low quality when compared to the still photography. Again, I'm not saying that everything's done underwater, it's only the spacewalks are done underwater. Now, continuing, take a look at this shot from Blue World of manta rays underwater. Underwater nighttime scuba dive videos have the same lighting issues, which leads me to conclude that NASA likely just turns off the lights at their neutral buoyancy laboratory. The Johnson Space Center offers capabilities in mission planning, crew training, flight product generation, and real-time operational support at its Mission Control Center, where they have a massive swimming pool with a full-scale ISS simulation. So again, my take on it, and I would really like anybody who believes in the space station to comment on this, and you won't find any of the professional anti-flat earth debaters ever addressing this. This is what I'm talking about when I say visual literacy. I mean, there are other areas where we can compare parabolic flights to the simulated gravity in the ISS. Two different things. Zero G, the way it looks in the hair, is very different on a parabolic flight from in the ISS, where it's really rigid and stiffed up with hairspray. But the lighting has always been an issue here, and I've always noted that, yes, the spacewalks, and not only the spacewalks, but everything SpaceX does, whenever they have the modules coming in to attach to the ISS, again, the lighting is very consistent with underwater, with light loss. All right, let's go ahead and continue here. Again, this is Obama's blackout. We'll get into that again. There's a movie coming out on the 22nd, and the movie coming out is called, I think was it Leave the World Behind? Again, the Obamas are into movie productions. They're on Netflix. And the movie coming out on the 22nd, on the anniversary of JFK's death, and I'm not sure what that's going to entail as far as the QAnon people, but there's an upcoming film, Obama's Leave the World Behind, the first fictional movie from the Obama's Higher Ground production company. It's based on a 2020 novel. Obama gave the Netflix film notes, scare the F out of the director. Now, what is this about? It's basically about a blackout and everybody versus everybody, end of the world type stuff. And this is fascinating considering that this guy was a president and now he's getting behind this propaganda, which has all the elements of concurrent programming having to do with preparing us for what's going to happen in the news very soon. When I was researching this, I couldn't remember the name of the movie. I searched Obama blackout movie, and I came across another movie called American Blackout. And American Blackout came out 10 years ago, and it was about a blackout. However, Obama's in it. He's in it as President Obama, telling people, hey, during this time of crisis, listen to the authority figures. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. 10 years ago, Obama's in a movie where they mingle fiction and reality. It's called Blackout, a cyber attack destroys the power grids. The movie uses footage of Obama asking citizens to, quote, stay calm and listen to public officials. And that came out on the first anniversary of Superstorm Sandy in 2013. It was the year of Super Bowl 47, the Blackout Bowl, where it went black for 33 minutes. And we're about to enter the presidential race to see who's going to be number 47. So I think there might be some predictive programming, some kind of foreshadowing built into that Super Bowl psychological operation. Now, recently I've been talking about death clingers and corpse clutchers. Well, John LeBon has come up with a similar approach to dealing with people who proselytize for the science. We're talking Science is in capital S, what I would generally term scientism here. Let me play the clip.
Faith that you like, and if it makes you happy and you're not hurting anybody.
Again, this is John LeBon. I'm going to put a link in the
As far as
chat.
I'm concerned, you can have any religious faith that you like, and if it makes you happy and you're not hurting anybody, then what's the problem? Believe whatever you want to believe. The problem is when people who are very dogmatic in their beliefs want to come to me and try and proselytize to me and convert me to their belief system. Does it bother you when people do that? Do you get annoyed by it? Are you like, man, come on, you're wasting my time. You want to believe that? Believe it. But why are you wasting my time? Does this ever bother you? Well, check this.
Yeah, what about think and let think? And this has been one of my points is I'm cool with people believing what they want to believe. If you want to believe that there's an epidemic of school shootings and 9/11 happened as described, if you want to believe everything you see on TV, that's fine. I'm not interested in waking up the dreamers. I'm not even all that, I'm more interested in not waking up, but in seeing how many people who have been habituated to the red pills, how many of them are actually salvageable. But it's fascinating here because we're talking about optional belief systems today.
This out. There are some people on the internet, and they are very upset that your main man JLB doesn't believe in their religious belief system. And in their case, their belief system is the science, with a capital T and a capital S. The science. And I've even managed, it's taken many months.
Again, capital S. And anyway, he says lately some folks have been spending inordinate amounts of time trying to get JLB to come back to the science. They want JLB to renounce his skeptical ways. And what's wrong with that is that you're supposed to be skeptical. It's built into science, but they don't want you to be skeptical of the science. It's fascinating with the media too. It's like I'm skeptical of the media, which means not just what they're telling me, but the frame of reference itself, how they frame it. You have to look at media, I think, as more than just a few competing networks, but as far more monolithic. We're in this immersive illusion, and the distinction between belief systems and actual knowledge has been effaced. I call this reality fluidity because it's really choose your own reality and it's not going to cause any conflicts. Where generally, if you had some strange belief, like if you thought you were let's say you thought you were JFK Jr., you would be put into an asylum for your own safety. Now, you can form an internet club and get a lot of fans. I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with it, although it does represent a philosophical crisis. But if this is just some big open air asylum, then does it really matter? This is clown world. But another point is I believe they're attempting to liquefy reality so the public will eventually demand some kind of order. They'll be like, hey, look, we had Brave New World. Can we just go back to 1984? Can we just Fahrenheit 451 everything and clean it up because it's too hard for us? And they will go with this because they have been trained not to have mental immune systems. Those of you who have mental immune systems, those of you who have been inoculated against psychological warfare, they don't like you. You are like the healthy super spreaders. You're worse though because you're basically living proof that they don't have to be a part of anybody's life. You don't need the mass media dependency, that relationship where people are believing stuff and reacting to stories as they come out every 24/7. There's no time to stop and think. And what we've seen in the last couple of months has just really highlighted everything this channel's been about. Arguing over who's faking what, or their fakes versus their fakes. And the truth of it is lost in all of it, and nobody cares. It's all mud flinging. It's like I was saying, I had this animation I was working on. I should probably just do it of Ben Shapiro throwing baby heads at the wall just to see what sticks. All right, let's see here. Joined by Lufus, and Diana South says, I believe the Kool-Aid hopium addicts are irredeemable. At least the ones I've known, they've invested and sold their souls. Okay, now there's a couple of elements to that. The Kool-Aid hopium addicts who have been troofied with mentanol, they've been, I think, led into what I consider to be a pyramid scheme. You know how pyramid schemes generally work, you invest all your capital into something, and it's like the sunk cost fallacy. Once you throw in so much, it feels like, well, I'm just going to have to just keep investing. I've thrown in too much to walk away from it. It's the sunk cost fallacy that has them. It's definitely a pyramid scheme, but instead of investing money, they invest their social capital. Their entire social media persona becomes about this thing. How many people do you know on Facebook? I mean, we saw this happen. It was a rift where you go from, hey, look, I'm sharing my life. This is my birthday. This is my family photo albums. This is me over here. All these people are just taking their private life and making it public. And it just seemed kind of innocent at first. But then everybody became politicized. You had all the avatars that would reflect the current thing. And then you could see how now your private opinions are public. And now they're going to, this is how they've managed to segregate people mentally along these two sides. But the people who have invested so much into this have no reason to walk away because they're surrounded by a lot of other people. It's like a bunch of gambling addicts. To be honest, I think there needs to be a QAnon Anonymous. Like QAnon Anonymous, kind of like Alcohol Anonymous or Narcanon, because it truly is an addiction. Selena says Blade Runner featured the blackout that occurred in the 30 years between 2019 and 2049. It was described as a massive EMP event that destroyed electronic records. You see, this is how they're going to burn everything. This is why we got to go into print, because they're going to do a digital book burning like nothing we've ever seen, where it's like, okay, we got rid of all of our physical books because they all carry COVADs, and now we have only digital, which they can turn off at the flick of a Chinese EMP blast. You know, they're going to, or whoever drops it, you know, Chinese balloon with a high altitude nuke to EMP significant portions of our. I guess they would target probably I I would guess the Northwest based on predictive programming. But anyway, it'd be a major disruption. That's been what we've been prepared for so long. This blackout, and that's why this Obama movie is about the blackout. This is what there was just another one I just saw on Amazon. Every single movie, you know, it used to just be global warming, but now blackouts are such a big thing. But the Blade Runner thing, I didn't catch that, and it's good to know because Blade Runner, we're talking about, I guess it comes from Philip K. Dick. It had to do with replicants. It had to do with basically trying to determine who was real or who was not real. And in a way, I kind of see the replicants as people carrying the banned mind viruses, analogous to the Hot Skulls in the series Hot Skull. There were some interesting bits of concurrent programming or predictive programming where, like, you know, life imitating art, etc., where the Cybertruck comes out like November 2019, and it looks exactly like the trucks, I think, in the new Blade Runner 2049. Let me see if I can pull that up. Because there was some Blade Runner comparisons, which are all by design. I mean, we live in a science fiction reality, a Disney universe. Elon Musk's Cybertruck from Tesla is straight out of Blade Runner. November 2019. It says here he unveiled the Cybertruck November 21st on Thursday from SpaceX's factory. But there's another off-planet influence that has a close appearance to the Cybertruck. It's the flying vehicle from Blade Runner and the sequel 2049. So they've actually called it the Blade Runner truck. But anyway, the movie, which came out in the 80s, it says here, funnily enough, Musk's release date coincides with fictional events from the movie's plot, which are set in November 2019. Interesting. Someone recently sent me a scene from, I think it was Heavy Metal, where you can see the inspiration for the Tesla Roadster in space thing. All right, let me continue here. Hillman Avenger says free range people are not allowed. Right. And there's no point in going off the grid and running for the hills if you're not mentally off the grid. If you're going off the grid, hiding in a bunker because you're afraid of nukes, guess what? You're on the grid because nukes are fake. And only people who are plugged into the world stage, quote, grid, would find that even like a good idea to go hide from something like that. It's not even necessary. Oh, good point. Selena says, I always wondered why Amazon called their book readers Kindle Fire. Yep, there's all kinds there. Kindle Fire, and what are they doing with Kindle? I remember at the time I was a bookseller in Amazon. I got into Amazon FBA, and I lived across the street from a bookstore. It was a used bookstore. It was my favorite bookstore, and they started just selling everything. So I was part of this where I just go buy boxes of books and send them off to Amazon. And it was like we were participating almost like looting in a way if you look at it like as 2020 was, I think, intentional, destroying the old ways, destroying the free market. You will no longer go to bookstores to look for books. It's all going to be done online. And that has benefits, obviously, but it also has certain ramifications. And this is where it gets kind of interesting because, we dump all the stuff off onto the internet, and where does it all go? You may as well just burn it because eventually it's being replaced, supplanted. And of course, the fact that the Kindle, which has replaced it all, is called Fire, makes a whole lot of sense. And I remember a few years ago, YouTube was bragging about the billions of comments they deleted. I mean, they brag about this. And this is why I don't think they even care that some of us here know the truth, know what's. I mean, look, people who are totally immersed in this probably think it sounds crazy when you say moon landings were faked. But for us, it's like we've looked into this so long, we've been studying this stuff. It's kind of a joke at this point. But even though we may have this casual attitude towards it because it's like been there, done that, moon landings are dead, in the future, everything we're saying here is going to be digitally burned. It won't exist. There will only be the MSM's version of events carved into stone. Dinah South says online books can be changed or just made not available. Oh, yeah, another point. They can be changed, they can be altered. I had a book on Amazon that they pulled because of misspellings, and it was because I made up a bunch of words like globe exit, for example. Globe, we were just making up terms, flat smacked, etc. And it suddenly got flagged when it started selling pretty well. It's like if people want to buy a book filled up with bad ideas, let them. But no, that's not where we're at today. Isabel Ann says, I was in Manhattan for the 8/14/03 blackout. It was amazing, organized chaos. 8 million people flooded the streets. They want you to believe it will be only chaos. Well, there were a couple of blackouts I find particularly interesting. 7/13/79 and then 7/13/2019 that hit 42nd Street on and put 42,000 people in the dark this last time around, where you can really see the intentional use of the number 42 in association with blackouts. So I've been paying close attention to their I guess you would call them their code, their symbolism, but specifically with blackouts, there's quite a lot with the number 42, and it's part of their broader set of symbols. But I've been noticing this stuff. Like for example, in 2020, it was just replete with that number, which we can get into the deeper symbolism of it. But for at one point in the summer, it was like MLB, you know, Major League Baseball, all had 42 jerseys on at the same time that the NBA did as well, but for two different reasons, purely coincidental, I'm sure. As in, Chadwick Boseman dies, Mr. 42, Jackie Robinson. So for Jackie Robinson Day, they're all wearing the 42s, as Chadwick Boseman, who played Jackie Robinson, just happened to die at 42. Meanwhile, NBA is celebrating the posthumous birthday of Kobe Bryant, who would have turned 42. So I'm like MLB, NBA, tons of 42s, as BLM is out there marching. And we had already talked about how every one of these race war psyops is encoded with the number 42. These are just kind of staples of how these things play out. It's like, what is it with the 42s and the 33s? Well, eventually the pattern begins to emerge, and you can kind of see. And it has to do with light and dark duality and the manipulation of these two things. And the race is just a cover for what is actually the alchemical manipulation of polar opposites by the power elite by playing upon these various trigger points. Like Derek Chauvin, the name Derek Chauvin, I mean, Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd was a ritual. And what was it symbolizing? Well, the Proud Boys had just emerged. And what are the Proud Boys? They're Western chauvinists. And what BLM represents is the vanguard of the Marxist revolution against the capitalist system, which is oppressive because it needs police to protect the property of the privileged class, who happen to be polluters who are destroying the atmosphere. So the I can't breathe has a number of meanings. I can't breathe is the poor can't breathe because they're under the knee of the oppression of Western chauvinism, the West, and we can't breathe because the West is destroying the environment. And then what's more, I can't breathe is asphyxiation. Asphyxiation for 8 minutes 46 seconds. The name Derek is derived from a historical hangman named Derek who hanged 3,000 people, a very 9/11y number. And he added something to the gallows called a derrick, which is now part of the cranes. If you look at cranes, there's a part in the crane called the derrick. It comes from this hangman named Derek. So the name Derek chauvinism actually is the hangman of the West, the lyncher. It was a lynching basically, is what we were saying, of the poor, of Gaia itself. It was a symbolic, ritualistic event meant to be interpreted this way. The 846 is a callback to 9/11, which kicked off at 8:46 a.m. Twin Towers, Twin Cities. Why was he being arrested? He was passing off a twin or a fake, a counterfeit of a $20 bill. Even the number 20 means twin tens. And the back of the $20 bill folded up has the Twin Towers. I think you've all seen that. But there are so many connections between 9/11 and this event. And if you look at it, you'll find the same code exists in all of these events, going back to Rodney King, Rosa Parks, Emmett Till. Well, the Emmett Till is what kicked off the civil rights. They brought it back with Trayvon Martin. But looking at the stuff, there are these deep patterns. So the Derek Chauvin versus George Floyd was a 9/11ing of America. But his name, Derek, I call him Derek Western Chauvinism, not a coincidence. Okay, continuing. All right, we have about 55 people here, good numbers. If you're looking on the screen, that's Tom Cruise, Dead on the Moon. I think that the song Space Oddity, David Bowie, who I think is a reference to David Bowman in Space Odyssey, he says ground control to Major Tom. I think it's about Tom Cruise going to space and not coming back. And at the same time, Bowie had released a track called The Savior Machine about a President Joe passing on control of government to a savior machine which cures war and hunger. So I'm thinking, Hell 9000, AI, or Gaia, the Global AI Alliance. The predictive programming has been so on point and consistent that there's no way Tom Cruise doesn't end up dead on the moon at some point in the next year. Diana Sal says, I can't breathe due to climate change. Exactly. Gaia can't breathe. The poor can't breathe, all because of the same offender, the West, and Western chauvinism. So the Proud Boys, sworn Western chauvinists, I think the leader was going to get 33 years in prison. They reduced it to 22. All of them sellouts and feds. It's all just psychodrama. Joined by Will Niedrich. Thank you for joining us here. Again, we're trying to be here every night at the same time. I'm trying to do 7 nights a week if I can. And the whole point of it is to put more and more and more time into this. I'm kind of trying to shift from art to this, and the trend is going that way. Let's see what else. There's the name Chauvin. Oh yeah, Western chauvinism. There was the kneeling for 846, which was the 9/11 connection. I can't breathe is an anagram for a better China, which makes perfect sense if you look at BLM in the context of being the vanguard of revolutionary communism again. Everything going red. And I brought up Western chauvinism because today Derek Chauvin had his appeal or whatever refused. All right, so we talked about JLB bringing up the people who proselytize for, quote, the science. I've been getting into a lot of conversations, or you could say debates with people on Twitter. Like there's one individual in particular who is really mad about my non-belief in the globe. Like he sees it as like a major detraction from my credibility. And it's like, I can't lie to myself. I don't believe in self-gaslighting, and I'm just a non-believer. I don't believe in unicorns. I don't believe in Bigfoot. I don't believe in the globe as described, but I don't have anything to replace it with because I don't have access to a rocket right now. But I'm okay not having all the answers. But I keep trying to make this point that there's a major distinction to be made between believing and knowing, and I've left the world of believers because I see it for what it is. It's an intentional, liquefied reality of pure subjectivity, the reality fluid, an open air asylum, a global asylum. We didn't do an obelisk rerun. I need time to go through it. That's what I mean. I have so much content. I want to go ahead and go back and improve, revisit, etc. And it will happen as I move again more and more into this. Okay, we have some interesting connections here I want to get into. Let's bring up a couple of other points though. Hitch Slap did a poll, and when I checked it, nearly 3,000 people had voted. Serious question, do you believe the earth is flat or round? Now, why can't any of these globe earthers figure out that it's a sphere? Do they think they live on a two-dimensional round earth? Like when they see blue marble, the blue marble, it's like a blue circle, perfect. It's not an oblate spheroid. It's not like a pumpkin shape. No, it's literally a perfect blue sphere. When they see that in space, do they think they live on that flat thing? Because they all call it a round earth. It's like, I'm sorry, it's a sphere. They can't figure it out. I've never met a single globe earther who didn't call it round. What's wrong with them? Anyway, Hitch Slap says, do you believe the earth is flat or round? 54% said flat out of 3,000. 29% said round. 17% said not sure. Now what we can say is this. I don't know what it looks like in its entirety. I don't have a model. But from what I can see, it's flat. From what anybody can see. From any non-lying, non-curvert can see. I mean, if you're a curvert, maybe you might see a curve. But I don't believe you. I think curverts are liars. I think they're lying to themselves. 2 plus 2 is not 5. You're not counting 5 fingers. You're reacting to psychological stress because Big Brother has programmed you. You don't see a curve. You live in a news-bent reality, and they've bent your horizon. You've internalized the GoPro. You've become a curvert. Curversion. Hillman says, does this place have to have a shape? That's a question I would like to answer because I brought this up yesterday. The Earth does not necessarily have to be a discrete object. Floating, falling, spinning, gyrating. Do we have to be living on a gyrating Earth? No. Does it have to be a discrete object? Do we have to debate how big of a ball? Is it a cube? It doesn't matter. It's the plane of existence. It's a realm. To me, it's more about worldview. That's the only thing that really matters to me at this point. But the fact of it is, according to the science, the universe is flat. So don't let them flat shame you. They're going to flat shame you because you don't believe that you're on a, quote, round Earth. It's like, well, your solar system's flat, and galaxies are flat, and the universe is flat. And then there's another point I brought up with one of the persons who was debating me about this stuff. I was like, well, you pretty much believe that you have all the information, that you know what's up, that your ignorance begins trillions of light years away. Like that's how far away your question marks are, because you know what is going on here on Earth, and you know Earth is finite and it's a discrete object, and we know everything here. It's a known quantity. But the edge of the universe, yeah, that's a question, but that's so far out there. So your knowledge base actually extends for trillions of light years. That's amazing. How complete you must feel. The only difference between that person and someone who is agnostic about the model we've been given is that our ignorance begins much closer. I don't know what's beyond 60 degrees south parallel. So I'm surrounded by questions. Big difference. Will Niedrich says, Tim created 2 new platforms every week. Oh yeah, we had 160 plus YouTube channels. And as of tomorrow, we will be strike free on all channels. I've played it very safe. Angst G says, Blob Earth. Yep, Shout out to Blob, rest in peace. But I'm suggesting that the Earth, the shape, maybe it doesn't necessarily matter as much as the question of worldview and how you arrived at that. The fact that you have a bunch of warlocks and wizards who can convince you that this thing has a shape means they can convince you that you lived within a closed system. And that's the main question. Open or closed system? Open or closed system? That's the main question. I would say that the globe and the domed Earth, or any model that's alternative to the globe, is in fact a closed system. The world stage is a closed system. And when I say closed, I mean it's not open to any new ideas, any new findings that might contradict it. CNN's Harry Enton explains that more people believe the Earth is flat than like George Santos. Okay, that's interesting. You know, we often talk about how they're all in on it, how it's all a reality TV show at a certain point, how there's no outliers. Like Jussie Smollett, for example. Jussie Smollett didn't get caught trying to trick the news, and they exposed him. That's what they want you to think. Jussie Smollett was written and scripted to be caught, so the news could make it look like if somebody tries to trick us, look, we can catch them. We can expose them. We will not tolerate liars among us. So it's kind of a scapegoat. You know what a scapegoat is? They bring out the goat, it absorbs the sins of the village, and they send it out into the wilderness. Well, that's what they've done with Jussie Smollett. He was a scapegoat for the news agency. So they could say, hey, look, if somebody tries to fool us, we will deal with it. Well, here they have a fabulist George Santos. This guy lied about everything. I think his parents died in 9/11. His grandparents died in the Holocaust. How was he even born? I don't know. His stories get richer and richer. He bilked people out of millions of dollars. He's basically someone who proved that to get to the highest positions of power in the world, you just have to be a really good bullshitter, a really good liar. Well, and an unapologetic liar. So this liar, exposed liar, confabulous George Santos, is he's a scapegoat. So you all think that if somebody tries, this will happen. It's like, no, they're all in on it. They're all just as bad as him. But he's the one who's the scapegoat to distract everybody from the fact that they're all liars. They're all fake. They're all confabulators. So here you go. He's explaining that the more people believe the Earth is flat than they believe George Santos.
Why are you throwing that in the trash?
Excuse me?
Keep it.
Hold on a second here. Commercial. This is, again, CNN. I'll just play a short clip.
He is below the Mendoza line. You can pretty much get 10% of Americans to agree on anything. But even in New York's 3rd District, you can't get 10% of voters to say that they like George Santos.
So George Santos is losing to the Earth is flat right now.
Yeah, there you go. So more people find flat Earth palatable than George Santos. Make of that what you will. Kind of interesting how loose they are with the word flat. They've been trying to keep that out of the mouths of anybody in media for such a long time, but I guess they must feel like it's safe all of a sudden. You got Travis Kelce saying the same thing. Flat earthing. Here's another one. This is Malik Alassal, a Lebanese-Canadian actor, writer, comedian, and he's actually pretty funny. I watched this whole routine here, and this guy is talking about how there are no, quote, no woke flat earthers, which is a very interesting proposition. Let me go ahead and play this clip. Sorry for the laugh tracks. Oh no, these are real laughs, excuse me, but I'm trying to get the volume a little bit down. Okay, here we go. This is just part of a 12-minute stand-up routine. I'll put a link on my minds.com account. This is from Don't Tell Comedy, Woke Flat Earthers.
Unlock your phone. I can see the way this guy's hitting it from the back. You're lying. I can tell. There's no woke flat earthers. There's nobody who's like the earth is flat, but, you know, I love everybody on it. We're all doing our best on this frisbee ride in space, man. That's traveling upwards to simulate gravity. We're all doing our best, and we got to pay attention because it's heating up. The disk is heating up. And the water's going to rise. It's going to pour off the sides. We got to be careful.
Now, the joke about water pouring off the sides of the flat Earth actually came from John Kerry from the Skull and Bones Society and the World War Zero initiative to cut your carbon footprints in half. He said the people who don't believe in global warming must think that it would have poured off the edge of the flat Earth.
People don't usually double up on causes like that. They're like, the Earth is flat and there's too many Filipinos on it, and it's gonna tip over if we don't find the edge that the Jews are hiding from us and put.
Now, unfortunately, even though he's being a little hyperbolic, he's actually kind of accurate because it is true that some of the top voices in the whole flat Earth thing did immediately attach it to Hitler, etc. Lean Dion says, derp. Yeah, I would say. But he has a few points here. There are no woke flat earthers. That's an interesting one there. It's interesting how just perfectly divided this whole thing is. Sort of like left wing believes in climate change, or the woke side's climate change, but the other side believes in chemtrails. They still agree that man's screwing up the earth, but they just disagree on the specifics. Okay, let's see. G33 says, what shape is the sun? Anybody have any answers for that? I could play a little more on this. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that was funny or even close to it. And I think he talks about yay. It's all good. I'm not going to play too much more of it. Anyway, there are no woke flat earthers. Make some good points. Okay, there's some predictive programming here. This was posted by Violet in our Gilded Research Facility. July 2033, the events of Last of Us. The Last of Us arrives on PC March 3rd, 2023. This was a video game we're referencing here. And following some delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic, The Last of Us Part 2 was released on January 19th, 2024. The Last of Us Season 2 is set in Seattle, to be filmed in BC. And then, of course, the first case of novel corona was January 19th, and it was settled, or it was in Seattle, where that actually, our ground zero took place. Okay, this is all really interesting. The series has similarities to COVID-19 in the pilot and early episodes. It's based on a mutant fungus that infects and zombifies humans, causing a pandemic. And the show investigates the roots of the outbreak. Although the lockdowns throughout the world, wow, this is interesting. Although COVID-19 triggered lockdowns throughout the world and the series was initially revealed in March 2020, I'll see if I can find more information on this, more pictures, but I'm looking at the photo here. You got to see. It says The Last of Us Part 2. It looks like the Space Needle crashed down into the ground. The Last of Us. Leave the world behind. What is with all these movies? They're just so dreary. Salon.com says, The Last of Us is an almost perfect metaphor for climate change. The Last of Us, where mycology and climate apocalypse collide. HBO's latest drama, The Last of Us, portrays a future plagued by fungi that turns humans into zombies. Okay, so they have this in the video game world. They have it on HBO. Fascinating here, though. Again, we're talking about how these movies are preparing us to accept things as inevitable. The Last of Us is right. Our warming planet is a petri dish. Fast forward to the show's central fictional drama, a pandemic caused by a fungus that mutates when the world grew warmer. Urgent warning that climate crisis could spark killer zombie fungus like The Last of Us. Okay, there you go. One of the unhinged globe defenders I came across on Twitter said, when the S hits the fan, I have a guillotine for the people who don't believe in the globe. He's like Gaia Akbar. And I'm like, the reason why these people believe that the S is about to hit the fan, that the world's about to end, is because of all this programming. That is 100% why. Let's see, continuing. Lean Dion says, the straw man idea of the flat disc rising in space. Yeah, that comedian. Yeah, look, this is the thing. Every single conversation about flat versus round begins with the premise that you're describing the Earth as a discrete object. That's why I say infinite plane. I say infinite until proven otherwise, and you can laugh at that and say that's ridiculous. Okay, well, you're in the infinite universe. Infinite till proven otherwise. What's at the edge? I'm not asserting to know. I'm just saying that I don't have reason to believe that it is what they say, and therefore I cannot conclude that it is a ball 25,000. I cannot conclude that there is reason that I don't say it's not a reasonable conclusion, I'll say. To just say that there's a barrier or an edge. Why would I assume that? But then of course you have this flat earth movement that started off with the premise that there's some kind of a wall of ice that holds the water in. But then they never talk about, well, what's over the wall? You're in the same box you were in before. There's no difference, if you ask me, between a globe Earth as a discrete object and a domed enclosed system. Two different closed systems. And I'm suggesting it's still an open question. We don't know for a fact that the land masses they have shown us are all that there is. And it's only within the last year that some of the more popular flat earth channels have begun, discussing that notion of land beyond. They used to really try to avoid that. In fact, Russian Vids, major league flat earther, kind of an anonymous guy these days. I haven't heard much from him. But he used to say, infinite plane is a satanic blasphemy. That God's earth is just this little spot. And to suggest otherwise is the same satanic heresy as the outer space. So basically it's the devil. It's evil to suggest that there's more to the world than what the Bible describes. G33 says, will we ever know the truth of something so vast? I would say no. If you're reliant on the truth being revealed from the same people who've given you the deception, no, your world's going to get increasingly smaller physically. Your meatverse is going to shrink, your carbon footprint's going to be cut in half. Your world's going to get smaller, but the metaverse is going to get bigger. So even though you can't go walk down to the park because you've ran out of allotted steps for the day, kind of like you're rate limited on how far you can walk, you're going to be able to go online and travel to distant floating balls in your spacecraft and land on those. You can go to 1 million worlds if you want. So many exoplanets. Just don't touch the one that you're on. That's really what it's about. Even Bezos let this slip in 2017. He's like, you're going to have a civilization of stasis if you want to have Earth still survive into the future. But if you want freedom, you have to go to space. Freedom and liberty will be for outer space. I'm going to play this clip because this is, if you ask me, this was when they gave away their big game plan. This is from a public appearance he made where they're discussing the difference between the civilization of stasis or the freedom and liberty of outer space. Jeff Bezos inspires a new Blue Origin video.
When Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon, I've been passionate about space, rockets, rocket engines, space travel. I think we all have passions, and you don't get to choose them. They pick you, but you have to be alert to them. You have to be looking for them.
So Blue Origin founder, CEO Bezos talks about inspiration of NASA's Apollo and how humanity has the choice: cap population and energy use or go to space.
We want a civilization of stasis. We will have to cap population. We will have to cap energy usage per capita, or we can fix that problem by moving out into space.
So there you have it. That's the bottom line here. Like they'll say, why would they lie? Every single naive round earther, I'm not going to call them globers. Every naive round earther will say, why would they lie? Why would they lie? I don't know. Maybe the richest, greediest people in the world have figured out that they can hide resources, conceal entire continents, dumb you down, put you into a dumbed down plantation, and bring in wealth from meteors or asteroids or whatever they're going to do. But they'll tell you, look, we cannot continue to live like this. You're just going to stay in your basements. You're just going to have to lock down. But don't worry, we'll give you good Netflix. Look, Barack Obama will produce movies for you to watch at home. No need to go out there and breathe that contaminated air. The unmediated mind says, infinity scared me as a child, whether it's burning in hell or constantly bowing and scraping in heaven, it terrified me. That thought still does, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. The idea of burning infinitely in hell, and it just seems like a rigged game. That never seemed fair to me at all. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm just gonna go where all my friends are going. And look, I don't even believe in that stuff anyway. I think it's psychological warfare. They used to scare people with that. If you don't quit your wickedness, you're gonna go to hell, and God's gonna flood the place, or you're gonna be branded. This is all. It's all about outgrouped. Be outgrouped. You're a sinner. You're unsaved. And today they've just replaced it. These new secular interpretations of these older concepts. Global warming for your wicked carbon footprint. All right, let's continue. So what are we going to have? Civilization of stasis or freedom in outer space? Well, outer space is fake, but if you accept the premise, then you get the stasis, and you never go to space. So that's the plan here. This is how they tricked everybody. They're like, hey, look, the right wing doesn't believe in climate change because they know it's a stalking horse for communism. What can we do? And they're like, well, let's use Elon Musk to convince everybody that capitalism leads to Mars and to space, that you can be a space cowboy and free market does it. So then the people who believe in freedom and free markets associate Musk and space travel with capitalism, which is a trick. Because space travel is really just a way to pitch everybody on everything that the hardcore environmentalists want to institute here on Earth. Sustainability, the new ideal, the Martian space commune. They want you to live on Earth as they want you to live on Mars and see this as a necessity. And they've already won. There's that expression about the long march through the institutions attributed to the communists where the workers of the world did not unite. Why? Because I guess they had it too good over here. They couldn't get everybody to renounce their attachment to higher standards of living and freedom. So the workers of the world did not unite. But now they will, because they've managed to convince people that the ultimate ideal that the future has for us, that where technology will lead us, happens to be sustainable living in these outer space environments where you won't actually be able to bring with you anything from the Earth that would constitute freedom. And you wouldn't even be able to travel. You're not going to leave your Mars base, your lunar communes. Let's see what else we have here. Going through your comments. Isabel Ann says Bezos has a $42 million 10,000 year clock in the Sierra Diablo mountain range. Yep, the Devil Mountain, $42 million 10,000 year clock. 10,000 is probably a reference to the 10,000 days return of Saturn. 42 is a way that they represent the symbol of Saturn. If you put the two together, you get the astrological symbol of Saturn. The 4 is the cross, the 2 is like the scythe. Then I think you could also attach to that, this Jeff Bezos, the 42, and the clock, Chronos. Chronos and Saturn are somewhat synonymous in this context. In fact, I picked up a book on symbolism used in Western occultism, and it's been very useful in interpreting some of this stuff. And when they opened up that clock in the mountain, they had a capstone actually. See, it's underground, it's all buried in the mountain, but there's a capstone that actually stands out, that absorbs the sunlight. They say it's a 10,000 year clock. But I believe it was Stuart Brand was there, the whole Earth catalog guy. There's just a fascinating confluence of individuals and people surrounding that $42 million clock. And again, we're talking about Jeff Bezos. I thought it was Elon Musk who is obsessed with the number 42. Maybe it's not just Musk. Maybe it's the entire space papacy. Like, for example, Richard Branson taking a ride on the 42nd anniversary of Skylab falling. All right, let's move on here. We're just going through our concurrent and predictive programming analysis, and there's a lot of flat earth stuff in the news for some reason right now. Let's see here. Donald Trump mocks Jimmy Carter. Trump, criticizing Biden at a rally in Fort Dodge, Iowa, told the supporters, quote, The happiest person anywhere in the country right now is Jimmy Carter because his administration looked brilliant compared to these clowns. Compared to Biden, Jimmy Carter was a brilliant, brilliant president. I guess he's getting a little flack because, of course, right now we're Jimmy Carter being the happiest person in the world right now. I don't know. Top story: Rosalind Carter dead at 96. Mental health activist, humanitarian, former First Lady dies. They had 77 years of marriage. Assuming this isn't all scripted and fake. I mean, who knows when they die? These stories are always loaded. Their entrance, their exit points, none of the stuff is coincidental. Not denying people die, but there might be some other subtext to it as well. I haven't looked too deeply into it. There's some people who believe that JFK, the actor who played JFK, President JFK, was repurposed as Jimmy Carter. Dallas Goldbug is the one who started that. And you can kind of see it. There is something there. Maybe. Part the hair the other direction, age a little bit, possibly. Let's see here. The unmediated mind says that clock already stopped a few times. Turns out it was a knockoff $42 million clock. Yeah, Inks G. Lauren Sanchez did a photo shoot there at the clock. I saw that. This is their altar. This is what they worship. The clock is Kronos, is Saturn, is the earth god of death and resurrection, the harvest, the green god, the god of recycling. It's death and rebirth, the recycling of souls. It's the same kind of symbolism. The original green god, the god of the earth, the green movement. When you're recycling to please Gaia, you're actually genuflecting and worshiping the god of this world. I mean, you can see the six-pointed star hidden inside of the recycling symbol, comprised of 3 nails. And there's a lot of symbolism packed in there, but it's the symbol of the god of the world. All right, let's continue. Yesterday we were talking about 9/11 drills, and I have a little more information about this because this is important. We had someone who said, I didn't know it would be possible to have cleared a set. They didn't think that 9/11 could have been a closed movie set. And I said, yeah, there were drills being done that day, and they said, this is the first I've heard of it. And I just want to point out that if you're being skeptical of conspiracy theorists, you're being skeptical of the people who are questioning everything about media, but you're not questioning media first, you're not being skeptical. You're part of the mediation's damage control. It's kind of like how people in religious cults reflexively defend their cult beliefs. It happens all the time. It's just part of groupthink. And I see a lot of groupthink where people are like, suddenly they turn into like T cells. Like they're part of the immune system of the beast matrix. It's like, hey, look, some auto hoaxers here. We're going to blow a hole in the side of the beast matrix and hemorrhage the thing. And then you get believers coming along and trying to patch up the hole. No, you can't say that. No, I'm sure it's not like the way you say. It's like, I don't know why you're defending this stuff. It's indefensible. It's evil. Stop defending evil. How about that? Just as a basic operating procedure. Let's just not defend evil lies that are used to psychologically terrorize people. Okay, now listen to this. Because I think we can make the case that 9/11 was a closed movie set. After the September 11th attacks, most of the 3,000 people who work at agency headquarters were sent home. An announcement for an upcoming Homeland Security Conference in Chicago noticed this exercise in a promotion for Speaker John Fulton, a CIA officer assigned as chief of NRO's Strategic Gaming Division, announced, quote, on the morning of September the 11th, 2001, Mr. Fulton and his team were running a pre-planned simulation to explore the emergency response issues that would be created if a plane were to strike a building. Little did we know the scenario would come true that day. The conference was being run by the National Law Enforcement and Security Institute. So here you have, from The Guardian, how the world changed after 9/11. It's just a reference from Tarpley here. The names of the 46 military exercises and hijack drills, things like Vigilant Guardian, that were taking place on the morning of September the 11th. This is the point of bringing up. It was the quote, greatest density of drills in American history. In other words, 9/11 has had it. This is a fact. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's recognized as having had the greatest density of drills in U.S. history, and these drills just so happened to coincidentally coincide with exactly what happened. In what the government describes as a bizarre coincidence, one U.S. intelligence agency was planning an exercise on September the 11th that had an errant aircraft crashing into one of its buildings. Agency planned exercises on September 11th around planes crashing into buildings. There's more, but they say it's just an incredible coincidence. As soon as it happened in real life, we canceled the exercise. Okay, sure. The NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, operates many of the nation's spy satellites. After the attacks, they were sent home. Yeah, it was like, good job, guys. Because if you ask me, they use these war game simulations to create the stuff that goes into the news cycle. This tells me that this is a huge open secret. How many people know about this? This is why they have a huge anti-conspiracy theorist industry. They got to keep us in line. But the point of it is this. If you believe it happened as described, now you're forced to admit that it was 100% fakeable. That one 9/11 jumper truther boogeyman was always saying, well, there's so many people walking around with handheld cameras. You can't control all of them. It's like, are you sure? If you have dozens and dozens and dozens of drills, you have like 1,000 police dressed up as people experiencing trauma on record on that day, I think the case has been closed here. This was a massive war game and mass casualty exercise coinciding with a controlled demolition. Nobody died and nobody cried except for the dupes who were dragged into the psychological warfare. Hillman says, same as 7/7, the drill became a real event. Nope, never happens. The drills never become real events. What happens is they do the drills to set up and stage the psychological operation. And then Alex Jones comes along to do damage control. And he says, sometimes the drills become real. No, that's not how it works. If it became real, now it's a war crime, now it's mass murder. Now everybody who signed an NDA to perform a drill are now culpable in something much, much worse. And real deaths, real crimes would actually it would nullify non-disclosure agreements. No drills ever become real events. Anybody asserting so is carrying water for the MSM and doing guard railing a la Alex Jones. The drill became a drill event, exactly. It's always, the thing is, they use drills to get the infrastructure in place. They use movies for the same reason. You remember this thing with Ohio, Palestine, Ohio? And that was foreshadowing. Remember when this was happened back in Ohio, you had this, the heart of it all, Ohio. And I thought, what's the symbolism of that? Ohio, the heart of it all, a train wreck. Then it turns out that this train wreck, this derailment, was exactly like the movie White Noise that was filmed in this area, and it even involved, in the evacuations, some of the extras from the movie. So clearly they used the movie to get assets in place to do the fake train derailment. And a lot of people fell for that derailment. InfoWars did. They were like, oh, the reason why you had the eerie coincidences in White Noise is because dark occultists have to tell you what they're going to do before they do it. Very ominous, I'll give them that, but it's total bullshit. Revelation of the method is what they call it. There's no such thing. The idea that dark occultists need to tell you what they're going to do so they can do it assumes that the thing is actually being done. Oh yeah, they got to show you that they're going to kill you before they kill you. No, nobody's dying. The foreshadowing is part of boring the neural pathways, conditioning the audiences to accept as inevitable what happens at the end of the movie. Movies have their beginning, their middle, and their end. And oftentimes predictive programming is just preparing you. It's like I said, boring neural pathways. It's mental rehearsal. It's opening the Overton window and bringing things into the realm of possibility that wouldn't otherwise be there. It's to change your frame of reference. Okay, let us continue. We have so many drills on September the 11th. It's actually a wonder that, like, look, here's what you're left with. Because we've never heard from any of them. We've never heard from any of these people who participated in these like mass casualty drills on 9/11. Like, were they victims then? For people who believe it really happened, now you have to ask yourself, all these thousands of mass casualty drill participants on September the 11th, were they killed in the plane attacks that you believe happened? If 9/11 happened as advertised, then maybe all of the victims were people who were simulating victims for a 9/11 like event. Like, what kind of irony would that be? That would be beyond just an eerie coincidence. But it's plausible, right? If you believe the official story of 9/11, it's actually plausible that all of the victims were mass casualty simulation actors, because there were so many mass casualty simulation actors out that day. It's actually more likely that a bunch of crisis actors actually did get killed on 9/11 than regular people, given the fact that they were crawling, these areas were crawling with these mass casualty simulation actors. I can't wrap my head around any kind of a coincidence theory to explain this. I'm glad I don't have to. I'm glad I don't have to swallow copious amounts of cognitive dissonance to function. I kind of like cognitive harmony. It is a thing. Although it's considered a thought crime. Oh, you're not traumatized? We have one that can see. You're not trauma bonded to the screen? You don't automatically believe what you see? Yep. We have a hot skull here. Okay, here we have Millet, who's screaming, "Long live freedom," etc. I referenced this earlier. He's got his hair out like the Ultimate Warrior. And I'm saying this is a WEF puppet. This is WEF acting like WWE.
Yo no me metí acá para estar guiando corderos. Yo me metí acá para despertar leones. Quiero escucharlo, Rufín.
Now, I don't disagree with his sentiments here. I don't. I think it makes sense. He's like, I'm not here for sheep. I'm here to wake up lions. But I don't confuse this with reality. This person is not a savior. This person does not exist outside of that black box. He's part of the program. So you can be entertained by it, but if you're going to follow it, well, it's like Donald Trump all over again. It's like Q all over again. Trust the plan, sure. Okay. Hitch Slap's poll now has 4,400 votes. It's still pretty consistent. Serious question, do you believe the Earth is flat or round? 54 flat, 27 round, 17.7 not sure. Illusion warfare. Les Luther says, why does Argentina's new president look so unreal? They're giving each country a trump card character. Fascinating. You know what? I mentioned it's the hair. They're drawing attention to the hair. There's some kind of a archetype they're trying to draw attention to here or something. But if you look at this image of him, it's very much like how they're portraying Trump. He says, after years of hammering the biggest demographic with the woke ideological nonsense, a quote, charismatic leader is then presented, and the masses will take the bait. I can see that. And this could be a pretty good indicator of what's going to go down with Trump in the next year. Very interesting there. Diana South says he looks like Gaddafi and Trump rolled into one. Yeah, Dave J had actually mentioned on X that this guy had Gaddafi vibes, and I looked at him. Does he look masky? But he made that connection as well, and he's the guy who first noticed that John Benet Ramsey grew up and became Kate Perry. So you can trust his discernment on faces at least. Okay, Supreme Court won't hear Derek Chauvin's appeal of George Floyd murder conviction. So let's talk about this guardrail here. The left wing believes he was killed by Western chauvinism kneeling on the guy's neck. That he was suffocated, he was killed by Derek Chauvin, as the video kind of suggests. The right wing says no, he was killed by China because China, open borders, and fentanyl. So it was an overdose. Both sides agree he's dead. On the world stage, George Floyd died. Left agrees, right agrees. I don't think he died. In fact, these guys were BFFs. They were friends. They worked together for 17 years. There's a lot of reasons to think that these two are hanging out, probably on Epstein Island, drinking Coronas, laughing at us. So the point of it is, he's not dead. But if you follow the establishment-friendly counter-narrative, you're going to stand in defense of Derek Chauvin, saying, no, he didn't kill him. Floyd killed himself. And this is one of these, what I call guardrails. It's just a alternative answer for those who aren't satisfied with the main answer. So now, Derek Chauvin has been turned into something of a martyr. He's being sacrificed on the altar of CRT, of BLM, pacifying the mobs, that yes, the police are the oppressors. So my point of it is, I don't think Derek Chauvin is innocent. And this is also kind of interesting to me too. How a lot of the people who defend Derek Chauvin because they think it's fentanyl are usually the same ones who are quick to call out police and how police shouldn't be able to pull you over and how it's like an intrusion on your rights. Like sovereign citizen types. People who generally don't like any kind of police oppression at all. The people who are afraid of their guns being taken are very comfortable watching Derek Chauvin kneeling on the guy now that they know George Floyd killed himself. And I'm like, well, maybe it was effed up either way. Like, maybe it was an overreaction. Although, if you watch the whole video, to be fair, the terrible crisis actor George Floyd was saying, I can't breathe, when he was in the back of the SUV. They had him in the back of a big vehicle, because he's tall. He's breathing just fine, because I could hear his lines. He's like, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He's in the vehicle. Then he said, can you put me on the ground? He said, will you put me on the ground? So, in other words, we were looking at street theater. And Floyd was a terrible, crappy actor. It's like he had one job, George, and that was to just read your line and die. But no, he read it too soon. He kind of screwed it up. But the audiences aren't sophisticated enough to recognize bad propaganda when they see it, so they fell for it. Here's a mass casualty simulation special effect. This is out in Gaza. And what you see on this guy's face is actually sort of like a mask, and I've seen these on various websites where they sell mass casualty drill equipment. So this, and the video itself is just terrible acting. He's just screaming. He's covered in theatrical blood. It doesn't drip. It doesn't touch anything else. Just a costume. But I wanted to point out that every time you have someone carrying a fake dead kid, you have a cameraman right behind him. And I've noticed there's a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 camera crew per victim. If you're going to get hit by a missile and you're going to scream, you're going to have a cameraman, a photographer, and a journalist watching you. And as you get wheeled on the gurney to the hospital, they're going to be following, recording your agony. Like, when does that ever happen in real life? This is such an obvious movie, but I'm just saying that the audiences aren't all that sophisticated, and they fall for this garbage. They probably fell for the paper mache-alien. Like, we just looked at a poll, how many people think the Earth might be flat. I'm kind of more curious how many people thought the paper mache-alien was real, aside from those of us who laughed at it. But there's a lot of people carrying around rubber people. Again, fake dead kids. The fake dead kid industrial complex. If you want to know, follow the money. That's where the money's going. It's also notable, just since we're on this topic, that the very first, this is an interesting piece of trivia, the very first building to burn, 5/25/2020, George Floyd gets killed, and then you have the riots in the Twin Cities where they kicked off. But the very first place to burn the first night was the Sigma 7, the place that creates the simulation training dummies. These things are surgically accurate dead bodies. They look so real. Or casualties, they weren't quite dead. You can intubate these things. But the company that makes the one that looks exactly like George Floyd was the first place to burn. And anyone care to guess how many years that they had been in the Twin Cities before they burned? Anyone? Again, 7 Sigma Incorporated of Minneapolis. Factory was burned after the riots began. If you guessed 33 years, you would be correct. Yep, thrusters are, you get a gold star with a 33 on it. Peace Circle 360 said, I started telling my lady about human vibrations work on over 800,000 kids on milk cartons never found, and she says, how dare you, those are real people. I replied, don't be mad at me because I don't believe fake missing kids or fake dead people in daily news. Typical blue pillar, I gave up trying to wake her up years ago. How dare you? That's called corpse clutching. How dare you? Those are real people. Now, I don't know specifically about the milk carton kids. Like, is that like something you can do yourself? It'd be kind of cool if they could do it for missing pets. You know, you upload an image of your missing pet. But the stranger danger stuff, missing kids, has PSYOP written all over it. Not that the stuff doesn't happen, but it's an easy thing to propagandize people with, where you're eating breakfast and then you have your breakfast cereal marketed at children. There's like toys at the bottom of it. You get your milk and there's some kid that looks like one of your friends or looks like you. It's like, oh, this one got snatched. It's terrifying. But people will reflexively defend a story like that for obvious reasons. Like, I think it'd be insensitive to say to someone that they don't exist without having something of substance to counteract it or to suggest that there's reasons to doubt it. Like, for example, you could say, hey, there were like 235 school shootings in 2015, 2016, and pretty terrible, right? And then once they agree with you, you'd say, actually, no. NPR did a study, as an article published called The School Shootings That Weren't, where they found that those were actually misreported. So those didn't happen. Good news, right? Like, you can show somebody how they are reality fluid, where 1 minute ago they were mourning the deaths from 230 mass shootings, and the next moment they were alleviated of that burden. They were let in on it that no, actually it didn't happen. You can actually show someone both stories. You can show them the initial reports and then the facts, and you'll see how their reality is fluid because they're not taking the time to be skeptical. They believe and then they believe. There's no pause. There's no gray area. There's no agnosticism. Like, what is a more logical position to hold on to? Model belief or model agnosticism when it comes to the shape or the size or the nature of the world beyond what you can detect. Like, is saying I don't know such a bad thing? They don't want you to say I don't know because it requires that you get answers that haven't been served to you. It means that you're not satisfied with the answers you've been given. Okay, let's continue. Just going through my Twitter feed, where if you want to follow me there, it's IPS Insider. I'm so looking forward to getting this thing into print. It's going to be a game changer. And it's going to be immune to the EMP. Here's Legal Man from US Crime Review said, so many people are excited about this new guy, but they don't understand the long game being played by those pulling the strings. And kind of echoing Les Luthor, he says, he's a classic case of when the people need a hero, one will be provided. And here you have it. Javier Milei, World Economic Forum 666. Right? Not that it's going to matter. I mean, you have images of, Donald Trump at parties dancing next to Epstein, and nobody has any problem with that. Oh no, he's just undercover. Oh, this guy was just undercover. He was just trying to get some dirt on Klaus Schwab for this rebellion. I trust him. He has the same kind of haircut as Donald Trump. I trust him. Okay, moving on here. I do like the fact that people aren't automatically falling for this one. I did a poll myself. Which is the bigger idiocy? Globe belief or shape agnosticism? Again, I got into this because somebody was trying to straw man me. And I'm not really a model-centric person. Like there's only one model that I actually do subscribe to, and it's the off-world stage perspective. I think the model that when we use the word model to describe the world, but it's like, shape is something you'll never directly feel, but it's like the total view, or the total version of the whole thing that you're expected to accept. And if you don't trust, do you have to have an alternative? Not necessarily. But to me, the real question is, where did you get your worldview from? And my perspective is just that we can't trust the primary source. We need more information, which means I don't know yet. I don't have a model. It's going to take a little time. And I'm not really in a hurry. Like, I'm not triggered by this. I think the insecure, model-centric people are kind of worried. Like they're defensive about it. And I'm like, really, why? Time will eventually figure everything. Everything will be sorted out in time. I really think it's just going to be a matter of either the consolidation of the metaverse and the cancellation of the meatverse, and they can turn the world into whatever they want, or the thing falls apart. Or they have to admit that Atlantis is real, or something. Maybe Antarctica's not necessarily the end of everything. I mean, where do you think Jeff Bezos and others are planning to go mine from when they say they're going to do space mining to become the first trillionaires? What's more likely? Okay, this is the article I put out the other day. I'm just going to go through it pretty quick here because I introduced a couple of new terms that are going to be used regularly here. So death clingers, corpse clutchers. Again, a corpse clutcher is like a pearl clutcher. We're talking about somebody who gets offended when you question the premise of the media's body count. And they love the whole body count game because the body count's kind of a loaded premise there. It's like, oh, the body count's 15. Well, assuming it happened. Oh, the body count just rose up. It's 18. Again, you're assuming it happened. What's the body count? Well, we haven't even determined that there was even one. So it's a game they play, and it gets people into the conversation. So the corpse clutchers, the death clingers, need to start providing examples. Their argument for holding on to some people died is just getting to be grasping at straws at this point. And the simulated news events do not have corresponding real events that the believers can point to. If they did, they wouldn't have to fake them. Think about it. If these things were real, they wouldn't have to fake them. This is why 66% of hate crimes are later found to be hoaxes, because they're manufacturing stuff. They're trying to manufacture the appearance of things because it's not happening. And I think at this point, it's safe to say that mass shootings in schools have been categorically debunked. And my question has been, why do people cling to the atrocity propaganda? Now, we know why people in media do. Money. There's nothing that Democrats love more than a pile of dead kids to grandstand upon and point to the AR-15 and point at the right. They love this stuff. They bank off it. If it bleeds, it leads. It's definitely true here. But the reason why regular people cling to it is that and this is we were all born, we all live within a lifelong, all-encompassing, immersive illusion. The world stage is real. It's the world that's been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth, to quote Morpheus. Again, Morpheus, god of dreams, the form of the dream world, the internal world, your internal representation of the world. So we live in a dream world so long as we internalize the world stage. If you accept the world stage as presented as the real thing and you internalize it, you're actually in a dream world that they control. And the people who are very conscientious, the people who care a lot, they have an overabundance of empathy, who don't know what's real and who don't know what isn't real because they just believe it all, for them it's a nightmare. Like the woke people. You think they're having fun? The people ready to riot in the streets? The people who are ready to go to war? Yeah, they are a little triggered, you could say. They're no longer in the safe dream world. And this is all, of course, by design. It's like if you try to stir, you try to wake up, they make sure they get you involved in a more intense way. Anything to keep you from exiting the thing entirely. So when I say fake dead kids' lives don't matter, they don't. But I say this, and people think I'm sounding like I have no empathy. But I'm saying it to make the point that the propaganda is actually targeting your empathy. It's targeting good people, targeting people that care, because they know that they can give you some crocodile tears and get some money, shake you down, and get you to vote a certain way, get you to shut up, get you to not think for yourself. So I'm not bereft of empathy. I'm just not going to dish it out indiscriminately to pathologically lying emotional manipulators. And if anything, auto hoaxing itself, this approach to looking at media from a very skeptical perspective, this is conscientious objection to the mind war. Now, what I want to do from now on and into the future is I want to hold the death clingers and the corpse clutchers to the same standard that we hold the MSM to. If you're going to say this atrocity just happened and this many people died, I'm not going to believe it without evidence. So if some truther comes along and says, well, look, 1,500 kids got zapped by space lasers, well, I'm going to say, well, provide the evidence. Because what we're highlighting here is that there is a divide between truthers who are de facto mainstream media guardrails and real skeptics. And I want the real skeptics to be on the other side of the screen from the truthers who are still carrying water, carrying fake blood for the MSM. Okay, let's move on. Death clingers, corpse clutchers, show us your evidence. 20-year-old Ohio man arrested for lying about being a victim here in a anti-Palestinian hate crime. You know how you can tell when a hate crime is fake? Didn't I just say 66% of hate crimes are fake? Why do they fake them? Because they're not happening for real. Okay, so this guy in Ohio basically is a crisis actor and maybe a freelance. I'm not sure if he was meant to be caught or not. Let's take a look. Yeah, okay, he even filed a police report, so this is a big deal. He lied to the police. He actually reported this. He told the Cleveland chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations that a driver hurled anti-Palestinian slurs at him and hit him with a car. Now, one of the ways I can tell a crisis actor is the selfies in the hospital. Like that, to me, is like kind of a weird thing. The hospital that I go to, the one over here, like you're not even supposed to have your phone out. Like taking your phone out, taking pictures of patients, taking pictures in the ERs. I don't know if that happens regularly. I mean, what about you? The only people I see doing selfies in hospitals are crisis actors and virtue signaling lab rats getting their vaccines. So this guy here is an entrepreneur, in today's world. Crisis acting is a new Hollywood, and you can really get a footprint in today's attention economy if you can portray yourself effectively enough as a victim. Like, speaking of crisis actors, Gage Grossarm recently, we talked about this, just got back into the business where I guess he's missing his old gig. He changed his name from Gage Grossarm because it's so Grosskrauts, excuse me. Gage Grosskrauts. I just keep thinking about his shredded bicep after Kyle gave him a shot in the arm there. Fake, squib, whatever, it looked gross. But Gage Grosskrauts changed his name to like Peter Prediger so nobody would find him. But then I think he got tired of being out of the spotlight, so he shows up on the news as having been hit by a car. I'm like, wait a minute, this guy named Peter Prediger looks just like Gage Grosskrauts, but he's wearing shades. And he's talking about how he got hit by a car. Like, why is that even newsworthy? And it totally contradicts his stated intention of changing his name to hide. It's like, what is it? Do you want to hide, Gage Grosskrauts? Or do you want fame? Do you want to be in the spotlight? You want to get hit by a car? And it wasn't Kyle driving, by the way. Does Kyle even have a driver's license? Paul Prediger, formerly known as Gage Grosskrauts. Oh, this is why. I was like, why would he be doing this? There's got to be a reason. I understand the need for attention and stuff, but no, look at this. GoFundMe. You could actually send some money to him. And this time it's his left arm that's busted. So he's a little more rounded out now. His right arm can catch up now that his left arm is going to be out of commission. Paul Predator, formerly known as Gage Grosskreutz, the man who survived being shot by Kyle Rittenhouse. Nice shot. In Kenosha. Look, he should say thank you, Kyle. Thanks for not blasting my face off. Kyle could have shot him anywhere. Fake or not, that was so well choreographed, and you just saw expert control where he's like, oh, gun in the guy's hand. Let me shoot that arm. Boom. It was actually perfect. It was poetry in motion. And one of my favorite scenes was after Gates, this is so bad, after he gets shot, he does that little jig. And like, oh shit, my arm, and he's jumping. And it's not supposed to be funny, but it's hard to feel bad for communists and stranglers and pedos. It's like, I'm sorry, but there is good and evil. And when you see a hero beating the bad guys, you're supposed to cheer. Thirst says Grossarm is still wearing his compression sleeve. Why wouldn't he show off his battle wound? Exactly. Why wouldn't he say, hey, look, this is what the AR-15 did to me? Like the way that they run with their victimhood, you think that he would have taken that to the bank. Like I would have donated to Gage Grossarm's GoFundMe to get some kind of cosmetic surgery to fix his bicep. So no, I don't buy this at all. But anyway, Paul Predator, formerly known as Gage Grosskreutz, again, trying to change his name to hide, and he changes his name to something unique that, look, if you search Paul Predator, you're only going to find him. Again, he should have gone with Bob Smith or something just so generic. Okay, so he has a fundraising campaign after a hit and run incident. So if I get hit by a car, do I get to raise money on GoFundMe? I don't understand this necessarily. Like, what's so special about his victimhood? Grosskreutz, 29, shot in the arm by Rittenhouse on August 25th, 2020. The incident, oh, by the way, August 25th, 2020, that was a month after George Floyd. I talked about the George Floyd thing and how the asphyxiation was 8:46 and how 9/11 started at 8:46. We have to remember the Twin Cities, the sun set 5/25/2020 at 8:46 p.m. Not a coincidence. Okay, let's continue here. Just going to this article. Paul Predator says the suspect was waiting for him to go through a crosswalk. Oh, so he was targeted. Because I made a meme as a joke where I put Kyle Rittenhouse's face behind the wheel. So he changed his name and has a GoFundMe for anybody who wants to donate. Recovery Fund support for Brady hit and run survivor. My name is Paul, and I want to express my heartfelt gratitude. My name isn't Paul, my name is Gage. My name is Paul Predator, the communist formerly known as Gage Grosskreutz. He's up to $1,560. He's not going to set any records. Daniel Penny, who fake strangled Jordan Neely, again, Neely, asphyxiation, George Floyd getting kneeled on. These are all just puns. The whole thing is the whole PSYOP and entertainment complex makes full use of puns and wordplays, double entendres. So you have Jordan Neely getting asphyxiated by Daniel Penny. Well, Daniel Penny broke a record for Give, Send, Go. I think he made what was his payoff? Did he make like $4 million? Like he really broke a record. So this is pretty pathetic. I'm just saying, it's pathetic. $1,560 for Mr. Grossarm. Maybe you'll get a semi-decent tattoo for your bicep, but you're not going to get any cosmetic surgery. He says, since the incident, oh man, this is so bad. This is actually from Paul Predator. Since the accident where I was tragically hit and run by an SUV. Tragically hit and run. This has been tough, physically and emotionally. I'm taking small steps towards healing and regaining my mobility. You broke your arm and you're immobile? Is your right arm still busted? That's just your left arm. Anyway, I guess I should be a little more sympathetic. But I'm not buying it. There's no way you're trying to hide by changing your name to another name that's even more recognizable. Here's a post by Michael Letts. I used to follow him quite a lot because he's always delving into this predictive programming for Donald Trump getting a head wound. And check this out. Mr. Beast was lying in state. He spent a week buried, I guess for 50 hours, some sort of buried alive type of thing. They put an eye patch on him in the video. So here you have a guy, Mr. Beast, dying and then coming back. Well, his name is James Donaldson. So again, you have James Donaldson Beast dying, coming back, and in the video, he has an eye patch. And this has all been correlated with Donald Trump as the Beast getting the head wound. Very bizarre. I'll put a link to the GoFundMe if anybody wants to donate to Grosskreutz. He should have stuck with his original name. He would have sympathy from the other side, from his side. I'm assembling clips. If anybody wants to send them to me, go to Gilded or email me, or just go to ips.monster, sign up, and respond to any of the newsletters. I'm collecting any clips from the ISS that I can use in the upcoming Cyber Symposium. And here's one with Don Petit drinking CGI coffee.
In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolution.
What you're seeing here is a coffee packet where the coffee goes in and out of the packet because it's on a layer separate from the layer where the container is, where Don Petit is simulating drinking coffee in space.
In a time of universal...
We have many more examples here. This video is about 90 seconds of non-stop bloopers, space bloopers. Things they can't explain, green screen glitches, harnesses, bad crossfades, bubbles in space are obviously a big one. Although bubbles in space have been misdescribed now as paint flecks, among other things. Like, they will not accept bubbles in space any longer as evidence that they're doing spacewalks in the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, which is why I make it a point here to describe the lighting under the, or in the space station, or on the spacewalks rather. The lighting is indicative of light loss. It has all the elements of being underwater. And you can see the way the light diffuses, that's underwater. Spacewalks are done underwater. The lighting proves it. And it's not just because they're, quote, on the dark side of the Earth, it's even when they're not. The way that the lighting looks on the video from the spacewalks is qualitatively different from any of the imagery you get from the inside or the still photography. And that's because, again, they're simulating it underwater, and water is 800 times denser than the air. It absorbs and diffuses the light, and you can see it. Okay, moving on. Diana South says, Gage was the name of the boy in Pet Sematary. Oh yes, Gage in Pet Sematary was played by Miko Hughes, who was also in Mercury Rising. Again, Mercury Rising, interesting term here, because that movie is about this autistic kid who can see through the headlines, crack government codes. He's some kind of a code breaker, and he becomes a threat to national security. So you're like, okay, wait. A child who can be a threat to national security because he's got some gift. Played by Miko Hughes Gage. And the movie's called Mercury Rising. Well, at 8:46 a.m. on September the 11th, 2001, Mercury was rising. That's when 9/11 kicked off, as Mercury was rising. Which is kind of interesting considering that his father, Miko Hughes' father, died in the Twin Towers on 9/11. So he's in a movie that has something of a predictive programming element to it with regard to the Twin Towers. He's in the movie with Bruce Willis from Die Hard, who's in all kinds of movies about jet fuel and explosions and buildings blowing up. So it just makes sense that his father would have died on 9/11, and he's in Mercury Rising. Okay, moving on. 11:22, big movie coming out on Netflix. I'll be watching and reviewing it again. It's the one by the Obamas, which has some interesting connotations considering 10 years ago Obama was in a movie as himself telling everybody to listen to the authorities during the blackout, and now he's produced a movie about the same thing. It's also the anniversary of JFK's assassination, and there's a good chance that a lot of QAnon types will be expecting JFK to return. Again, that's coming up on 11/22. I would actually consider going to Dallas. It's only a 9-hour drive. I would consider going over to Dallas if there's going to be some kind of gathering at Dealey Plaza, because I'm pretty sure it's a psyop. I'm pretty sure that there would be every indicator that there's nothing organic about it. Like, are they bussing in actors? Where do they get these people to put on JFK Jr. masks and march around like a bunch of clowns? Okay, let's see what else I have here. Based Schizo J says, "You are the least nefarious flat earther out there. I've seen you call out the pedos in the movement and weirdos, and when you talk about the subject, you have no definitive model like the grifters do. I just question your motives." Question my motives? For what? For noticing that we can't trust any of the cartoons we've been given as explanations for what's out there? Like, yeah, I don't believe we live in a Disney universe. I don't believe in space travel. I don't believe any of the astronauts are anything more than just bad actors. Like, I'm a non-believer. And this individual seems to have an issue with me being a non-believer. But I'm actually fine with that. The Mental Immunity Project is terrified that there is a culture of disbelief coming out, that this emerging culture of people who will not believe. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you're a non-believer. You're a non-believer in the religion that you're not a part of. And do you feel like you're lacking anything? Do you feel like you're missing anything because you're not a part of that other belief system? What I'm saying is that and JLB brought this up with the people who make their arguments from the science in a very unscientific way. We're just pointing out that there are optional belief systems that have somehow taken the place of actually knowing. It's like a dead end. False explanations do blinker you in. A really good example of where the average person is today is given, I talk about the movie The Village quite a bit, but there's even a better one, a better example in the movie Room. And Room is about a child born in captivity because he doesn't know his mother was kidnapped before he was born. And she has to live in a shed where this psycho named Nick keeps her. So she gives birth to Nick's kid. And he grows up, and for his first 5 years, all he knows of the world is the room and the television set, which tells him, well, he doesn't even believe that place exists, but she doesn't tell him there's anything outside of the room for his own protection. But when his 5th birthday is approaching, she starts breaking him she starts kind of letting him in on it without being too obvious at first, but she's like, look, there's more out there, but we're going to have to escape in this way. And he doesn't believe her. He doesn't believe his mother that there's more to the world than the shed. He says, you're lying, and he screams. He actually screams and cries when she says there's more. It's just like what you see on TV. And she says, no, I was lying to you the whole time. Now I am unlying. So the word unlying was kind of new to me. I'd never heard that before. But I think it was an interesting kind of way of describing what she was trying to do. Because she had molded him and his perceptions to only accept this limited view with false explanations. Like, oh, there's nothing there. And now suddenly she's changing the whole story and he's having a bit of cognitive dissonance. G33 says that was a real story, allegedly. Yeah, I think it was. But the movie poster is what stood out to me. It had, like, let me see if I can find it. It had a sky with obvious creases in it, like it was just a room painted to look like the sky. Yeah, here it is. Room 2015 drama mystery. And if you look at the movie poster, it kind of tells the whole story. But it says a lot about the nature of the immersive illusion. And I think it is a pretty good description of world view. And where did this child get his worldview? From his trusted source, his mother. Love knows no boundaries is the tagline here. My point of it is, of course, is that lies are used to confine minds by offering explanations that if you find them satisfying, you have no reason to go any further. You have no reason to ask questions. And I notice that the people who are in love with their models get triggered when you question their boundaries, when you question their assumed answers or their explanations that they trust. Like this conversation I was having with this guy on Twitter, I was like, the difference between us is you think that questions about the nature of reality begin trillions of light years away, and I'm saying that the question marks are much closer. That the assumed knowledge is actually just a false explanation, and that when you pull away the false explanation, what are you left with? Ignorance, no answers, and the realization that the people who gave you the false answers were lying to you, which is why most globers cry and scream like the kid in the movie. And many of them are very childish, and they do resort to a lot of name calling when it comes to these debates. If you want to call them debates, and they're really not. Flat versus globe is not a debate. That's not the right starting point, because there is no flat model that can be where you can actually assert that, yeah, it's flat and it's a discrete object. There isn't one. Okay, let's see here. I'm on Room 2015 on Wikipedia. I want to find out if it is based on a real thing. Akron, Ohio, 24-year-old and her 5-year-old son live in a shed they call the room. They're captives of Old Nick. Now, I think Nick might represent the demiurge. Now, what's kind of interesting is when she comes up with a plan to get him out of room, it involves playing dead. So you know how you have all these different secret society frameworks where the initiate gets symbolically killed to their old self, their old concept of the world, and then they're shown the light. That's kind of what happens here, and it's kind of interesting because she has to convince old Nick that the child is dead. So she wraps him up in a blanket or in a carpet, like a cocoon or like a coffin, and old Nick takes him out and throws him in the back of the truck. And he's been given instructions that when the truck goes through 3 stops or something like that, unroll and then run. So what happens is he is in the room, he dies symbolically, and then he's reborn in the real world, free of the ignorance. He's shown the real thing, that it's much bigger than room. And this is kind of fascinating how in the Masonic context specifically, the initiates are brought into the room with a hood over their heads, and it symbolizes the darkness of ignorance that the rest of the world exists within. So the people outside of the temple, the profane, live in a wilderness of darkness. The people inside have been shown the light. They have the hood removed. So the movie Room, in a way, is kind of showing us how mankind, that we are the child in the room, imprisoned by old Nick. And if we were shown the light, if we were initiated, if we were, I don't know, brought in through their cult networks, maybe we would find out there's more to the picture than the false explanations would suggest. And there was something very Masonic in a way about his staged death and resurrection into seeing the world as it was. Let's see what else we have here. I don't see anything about it being real yet. I'm still checking on the article. I do think it was based on a real story. Psyopsical says Floyd lives. Oh yeah, Floyd lives and free Nick Cruz. I can stand by both of those. All right, let's see what else. Tominoid3 says, and once freed, he has to wear a mask because the air is so dangerous. I don't remember that part, but probably. And how, I don't know what the effect would be, if you were completely locked away like that for so long. I mean, as long as you had a TV, I don't think you'd have a hard time adjusting. I mean, it's not like people need to get out very much. They're really getting people used to the idea of ubiquitous lockdown as the standard way of doing things. So I have a press release here having to do with Musk's lawsuit against Media Matters. Okay, this should be good. Not that it matters. It's in the sense that it's all kind of world wrestling entertainment level. You'll probably see this in the headlines tomorrow. It's for some reason it's blowing it up that Musk is suing Media Matters, which is kind of like a leftist fact checker organization. The thing of it is that they're all on Team World Stage. None of them are about the truth. Musk fighting the left-wing guys, it's all theater. I mean, I can't really emphasize that enough because he's one of the premier space fakers. He's put you in the room. We are in the room because the space fakers have provided the false explanations necessary to convince us of it. So if we are living in a world that's less than what it is because our internalized representation of it has been so distorted, yeah, you can actually credit people like Musk. So the idea that he is in any way fighting for, free speech or any of that, or freedom in any sense, freedom of movement, no way. He's already rate limited my tweets. Okay, I got a comment from somebody via Skype. He said, I wanted to talk to you about November the 22nd, how it's 8,888 days after JFK Jr.'s memorial, and it's 20,777 days after Jack Ruby died. Yeah, I see that. There was something else too. Is it 6 years? 6 months, 6 days. There's some other combination there where it's like Donald Trump said, you'll find out about the storm, and that actually corresponds to the 22nd. So there are a few things. I started off tonight talking about my ironic NASA hoodie and how I'm creating some more merch because I opened up a Shopify so I can distribute the IPS Insider. Not everybody's going to use eBay, so I can't only distribute the tabloid through eBay. So by using the Shopify platform, I'll be able to sell it through any of the websites with embed codes. It'll be very easy. I can do buy links, put it in the emails. It'll make it very convenient and easy to set up recurring subscriptions and everything else. Order tracking is built into it. So it's the perfect platform. And I brought up this hoodie because I'm only wearing a NASA hoodie because I don't have any IPS merch at the moment. I'm thinking maybe I need to re-emphasize this as a way to maintain a foothold and grow a foothold, get an even stronger presence in the meatverse. So I have this shirt up here. Every morning I do a Good Morning Disease X post over on X. And last week I did this one. It's a penguin overpouring sugar into the coffee. And on the screen you have a meteor about to hit the Earth. CNN is announcing it. This is on a t-shirt again at infiniteplainsociety.shop, which is where you can get IPS Insider and all of our books. So in addition to eBay, infiniteplainsociety.shop will carry everything that we do here. Everything that we have, all books and everything. Starting pretty much today. And I'm probably going to start putting the Good Morning Disease X images onto coffee mugs. Tomanoid3 says you can tell it's real because it looks so fake. Talking about Musk. Yeah, if you had any, I had a little hope for some reason that the media would jump the shark, that they would push some psyop so far that it would all fall apart. And I thought Starman would be it. I thought this has got to be the end of the space psyop. Musk just ruined it. He went too far. It's too fake. It's too fake to get a pass. And when Musk came out and said, well, it must be real because it looks so fake, I realized, you know what? We're doomed. We're going to have a paper mache-alien invasion. They won't even try to make it look real. But I lost all hope that bad special effects will be sufficient to overcome the cognitive dissonance. It won't be. Remember in 1984, the guy is literally counting 5 fingers when there's only 4. It's the power of self-gaslighting. I guess it's self-gaslighting and trauma bonding. I mean, that's what 9/11 was about, trauma bonding. That's what 2020 was about. Okay, phones are open. I saw someone was trying to call. My ringer was off. 505-349-0420. I got a ton of messages from this person about the dates tying into JFK and 11/22, and I have a few more. Some of these are pretty good. November the 22nd is 6 years, 6 weeks, 6 days from when Trump said, "You'll find out." When they said, "What storm, Mr. President?" October 5th, 2017. Okay. What's more? November the 22nd is 8/9 on the Julian calendar, which is 17, which is Q. Okay, fine. JFK Jr. Sr. will be 106 years and 177 days. Fascinating. I don't know what to make of some of these connections. Like, do we automatically assume that 77707 means something any more than 6660? I don't know. There's a point where cognitive bias kind of determines where somebody is going with some of this stuff. I guess the point of it is this. If any of these things have had predictive capabilities, they would have demonstrated it by now. Has any QAnoner been right about a single thing in 8 years? No, not one. Polly says there's no such thing as too fake. Mass trauma psychosis is powerful. Yeah, I've come to start using the term massified, like the massified mind. The massified mind is like Truman in the Truman Show, or the Sims in Westworld before they find out that they're Sims. The walking dupe, the clown that doesn't know they've been clowned. And that's us. Look, if you still believe in moon landings, you, from the point of view of the controllers, you have a dunce cap. That's what the mask was. The mask was actually a dunce cap. It was an indicator of your level of brainwashing and how much they can troll you into submission. And they usually do so through emotional appeals, peer pressure, fear of outgrouping, fear of being laughed at. It's fear-based mind control, but we talk about this quite often, that the pandemic was spread through, fashion, fear of not fitting in, fear of being left out in the cold. We have had decades of zombie movies where the main theme was quarantine. Oh, there's zombies. Go hide. Lock yourself up. Don't let anybody in. Don't let the guy with too much empathy open the door for one person who's a straggler, because then if you let that person in and they're infected, we're all dead. Like, these are stories that they've been telling us for so long that everybody just fell right into line, no matter how fake it was. Like, we didn't get Kung Flu like they had in Wuhan, where people were falling on their faces. We didn't see people dropping like flies. We saw Tom Hanks get the sniffles, and then everybody fell. Everybody just went into their basements. Everybody went into their bunkers. They stopped doing anything. They started just, hoarding toilet paper and becoming hypochondriacs, covering all their groceries in hand sanitizer before eating it. Because Tom Hanks, Tom Hanks was the first one. He had the sniffles. And do you remember the story about Tom Hanks anyway? He's going to Australia to fight climate change, which they never explain how. Like, what are you going to do? But he's going over there with his wife to fight climate change because the news is telling us Australia is on fire. So if you look at the images of Australia, it looks literally like an inferno. Well, Tom Hanks was in the movie Inferno, a Dan Brown movie, based on a Dan Brown novel, rather. Inferno is about a super virus. And the character in the movie wakes up in quarantine, in a hospital, basically, in Italy. Meanwhile, Italy was in quarantine. So, patient zero, as far as American celebrities, Tom Hanks, comes down with the virus, gets locked down in the inferno of Australia, just like the movie about the super virus Inferno, which starts off with Tom Hanks locked down in Italy, which was the first place to have the lockdowns. And it's just too perfect. Multi-layered psyop. Again, phones are open. I missed the call. We still have at least 15 more minutes here. But yeah, there's no such thing as too fake. The fake nukes, brought us into this modern world stage. It really brought us into the movie. But when they did the moon landings, when they convinced us that we could land on moons, that space travel was real, they pulled us deeper into a dream world of subjectivity where more and more of the universe is going to have to be explained to us through a smaller group of people. It's less knowable, and now it's more of a belief system. Jay Diggs says at one point they said they would use his blood to make the V's. Now, does anybody remember the name of the Wuhan whistleblower and how old he was? Again, patient zero, the real patient zero for this whole thing. If you really look at the story they gave us, it wasn't somebody eating bat soup that got the attention. It was the guy who blew the whistle in Wuhan. That is correct. His name was Wee Lion, and he was 33. Infinite Plane Radio. Hold on one second here. Caller, if you want to... Okay, there we go. Hey, what's up?
How's it going? Long time.
Yeah, who is this one more time? I had a little bit of a had a blank spot there. I was trying to unmute you.
Oh yeah, no problem. I was kind of back a ways ago because I paused, but you were talking about like movies using real newscasters to make the movie seem more real.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And that's interesting to me. It's always been interesting when you're watching a movie and then you see a recognizable face, like a talking head that everybody knows, to make the movie seem more real. But it also shoots them in the foot when you're watching the news and you're like, hey, weren't you in that movie like bullshitting me just a second ago and now you're telling me to believe it?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw this even, I believe there was a movie about a pandemic where you had people from the WHO in the movie, and then they show up on the news, and what they say on the news in 2020 is like word for word what they had said in the movie a few years before. And we've seen examples of this merging of these TV personality experts and fiction, and it helps catapult the propaganda into the news when it really comes out as quote real. It's incredible.
Right. It's like, do you want us to believe the movie and the news at the same time? And it's basically they're programming people to believe that everything is the movie and the news, and they're living in it.
Yeah, I think this is the real meaning to Kubrick and the whole monolith thing with Space Odyssey and David Bowman merging with the monolith. I think what they did was they merged our internal experience of the world with their movie version. And so we do live in a movie insofar as it is like a falsified history that they're creating as they go. And they have their own directors, they have their writers, and anything not on their script just gets removed. So they have made this into a de facto movie. And the people who believe it as real and literally true live in an augmented virtual reality. It's incredible. It's like a simulation for them.
Right, and that's why society outcasts people that say that we're living in a movie, and they say, you're a conspiracy theorist. What they're really saying is you're not playing your part properly in the movie.
Absolutely. The NPC script is whatever you were indoctrinated with and echoing whatever you hear from the MSM. Anything else that's original from your own perceptions that didn't come from the screen will necessarily have to be cast aside, marginalized, and ignored. This system is very Kafkaesque in the sense that individuals don't matter. It's almost like it's all top-down communication, and you're just meant to be a part of the hive mind. You're just a number.
Right. That's why the key words are stronger than ever. Like whether it's if you see commercials, they're talking about this community, that community. It's all like globular mentality. They're talking about democracy and community and group this, group that. Everything is like a collective mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. And what they've done with like climate justice is one of the new ones where they're taking the idea of the oppressor and the oppressed and attaching it to everything, and then they're trying to get you to group yourself in. You're with the oppressors and they are the oppressed. It's a fundamental divide where they have everybody split, and you're no longer an individual in the system. You're tribe A or tribe B, and this political horseshoe dominates everything. I don't see anybody escaping that. And it seems like ever since Q came out, most conspiracy theories have somehow led back to the voting booth. And I always thought that it should lead the opposite. It should lead to some kind of apolitical worldview. But I guess that's just me at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, society has, they wouldn't know what to do if they weren't shown the flashy thing that they're supposed to follow. If that stopped, people would be so bewildered, they would be completely useless. They'd have to figure out what to do to survive if they weren't following some new trend.
Yeah, that's a good question. What would happen if the media monopoly broke? Because that's what we're looking at. It's a worldview monopoly. And if our unified view of cosmography, history, the past, and what's to come, if that fell apart, what would happen? That's a very interesting thought experiment. I've been wondering, like skepticism on our level, does it really lead to any sort of confusion? I don't think so, but I don't know how this would work if many people at once came to this kind of view.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember our conversation before COVID actually hit the U.S.? When we were talking about, I think your main premise of your show that night was the strange things that happened around Kobe Bryant's helicopter death. And I called in and I wanted to talk about this strange virus. And it was before it was really a big thing. Like, we had no idea it was going to become a global lockdown. At the time, I was like, hey, China could possibly use this virus to, put hoods on people's heads and make people disappear that are protesting for Hong Kong right now. And I think they did, but we had no idea it was going to be a global thing at that time. February 2020 or something like that.
I remember minimizing it, thinking there's no way. Just like I thought nobody's going to fall for Starman. I minimized it, and I remember Kobe Bryant's death had some interesting connections, like his name, Kobe and COVID. There were some connections people were making. They were like, look, he's buried in Corona del Mar. The death date coincided with the Challenger explosion week and the Apollo explosion. A lot of like immolations in the sky, not to mention the predictive programming. So many other elements to it, but yeah, that sort of was like a signal. When that happened, it was like after that, everything just sort of changed. But I remember minimizing how big it would be.
Yeah, and I think we talked for like a couple hours about it, or like at least like an hour and a half, and I was just like, man, what are the possibilities of like an enemy that the government tells you can't see, and any action the government takes is for your safety? Like, holy shit, it actually all happened. They did it worldwide.
Oh yeah, and what's interesting is I remember at that time I had some callers were a little scared that it would never end, and I was like, this is just Psywar, and the fear was really ruling everybody's minds. And now we can look back and recognize that we had level heads the whole time. Everybody else went through the emotional roller coaster. They entered into the news cycle of abuse blindly, despite having known better in other areas. They fell for this psyop. So I'm glad we didn't. We kept our heads above water on this thing. And I think we're pretty much Psywar immune at this point. But it showed us that it doesn't matter. We may know, but the masses don't, and they rule this place because there's more of them. The massified mind.
Yeah, that's why I'm not a huge fan of like democracy in general, because it's basically, you can sum up democracy with gang rape. Like, if the minority votes against being raped, it doesn't matter in a democracy. So I don't think it's a very good system.
Yeah, I think Bill Hicks put it like Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner.
Exactly. Yep. And then there was somebody that made a correction to that about like a different system that was better, a well-armed sheep that has an opinion.
Yeah, right, exactly. And this is a great point because it's like the public or the general public, as we know, we're in a state of I would say Stockholm syndrome. Then we have this bad toxic relationship with media. We're in no place to make any serious decisions about anything, but nobody would know. I mean, this is crazy what we're in right now. It's it's clear to me that it's a world of believers lost in subjectivity, Brave New World style. Meanwhile, the knowers at the top are completely aware of what they're doing, and they're intentionally liquefying our reality with copious amounts, a deluge of mis and disinformation and sheer nonsense. Not to mention the psychological warfare operations that are nonstop. But no, we're witnessing something pretty incredible, if you ask me. Just this dump of information.
Oh yeah, it's every news cycle has something incredible, but it doesn't become incredible until you watch the reaction from the majority.
Well, we're 2 days away. 'Cause, I brought up the stuff about how we had Barack Obama in a movie telling us, hey, listen to the authorities because of the blackout. And we're 2 days away from an Obama produced blackout movie coming out on Netflix. And of course, Netflix's co founder, first CEO, is a blood relative, a descendant of Edward Bernays, propaganda, and Sigmund Freud, understanding what's in the subconscious, what's under the hood. So it all makes perfect sense that a former president would be releasing a movie about one of the most predicted events, psyop wise, of all time, this big blackout thing, and that it's coming out on 11/22. So, any expectation for 11/22 other than the movie?
No, not really. I mean, I'll get around to it. I'm not really a movie buff. I don't really jump out and watch everything that's brand new because there's so much. We are in an information apocalypse right now, and we're drowning in information. So I've literally backed off a little bit from breaking news and current brand new things. I'll get around to it on my own time. It makes me feel like I have more of a sense of freedom of my own life, that I don't have to jump through the hoop that they put in front of me immediately.
That's smart. In fact, that's exactly the premise of auto hoaxing. Suspending judgment to release yourself of the emotional bondage for stuff that probably doesn't even matter and can't even be verified and in all likelihood is fake. That is exactly the purpose. You've broken free of the news cycle. And that's the key to this thing. If you're leashed to the news cycle and every 24 hours you got to keep up and you got to believe and react and give your hot take, then you're not a skeptic at that point. And if you're not a skeptic, chances are you're pretty high strung and you're worried that the sky is going to fall and it's all going to end and World War III is tomorrow. Meanwhile, here you are, just kind of sailing along at your own pace. You're sane.
Yeah, and I don't want to give it more power that they're not paying me to give it.
Well, it's
like
the attention economy is what they call it. They call it the attention economy, and they want you to pay attention. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to look unless you pay me. That's kind of my attitude. And when I watch one of their bad movies, I'm getting paid because I'm reviewing it and growing our network. But I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't have that incentive.
Right. There's it reminds me of something I watched years ago, or listened to years ago. It was what's his name? Anyway, I'll think of it. It was a podcast where there was a YouTube executive, not executive. It was somebody that built the algorithms to get more attention. Sam Harris. It was a Sam Harris interview with somebody who was like on the front lines at the time of creating algorithms to gather more people's attention and profile people and give them things that would entice them to give YouTube more attention. And they were happy to report back if their algorithm gained like an average of 5 more seconds or another minute from a user. That's
Wow.
how important it is.
Ev-
Your attention is so important.
every single drop of loosh. And this occurred to me back when this channel started, because we would have 3, 4 hour, 5 hour live streams. And I'm thinking, you know what? Every minute that you're here, even if we're just BSing, even if we're just chatting, throwing out memes, every minute that you're here with this think tank, you're not plugged in to Netflix. And back then I just thought it was entertainment. Now I know entertainment's a side effect of the propaganda. So every moment that you're within a think tank or a conversation of people who are skeptical of media, you're unplugged, and that's a threat to them. They don't like this network, and that's why this channel's been targeted so often, because we've been maintaining this for a number of years now, an oasis of sanity in an increasingly subjective world.
Yeah, exactly. And the almost, what do you call it? Like the Asperger's approach is probably the safest for the individual. Maybe not for the collective, but basically like absorbing knowledge without frantically freaking out and making decisions based on the panic, but just, calculating the news that's coming in rather than acting on emotion. And I think the whole world is like so used to just acting on emotion based on reports. And they have to trust it because the reports are coming from sources. But like, what are your actions supposed to be? Like,
Yeah.
I like to analyze and say, how am I going to like put myself in jeopardy by believing this bullshit? And I assume it's bullshit because they've bullshitted us like constantly for years.
Well,
What's the
absolutely.
agenda?
Absolutely. And the idea of holding on to that information and examining it before you accept it, that's the pause. That's the suspension of judgment. And they give us so much information you don't have time for it. And it was Aristotle who said it's the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. And that's what we do here. We entertain all kinds of stuff without accepting it. And by doing so, we reverse engineer bad ideas. Like, not only do I know it's ludicrous to say pandas are fake, but I can explain why somebody would even arrive at such an erroneous conclusion. So instead of just dismissing bad ideas or ideas we don't believe in, I think it's important to examine them for their own sake, which to me makes this philosophical. Like, we obviously love information, or knowledge at least.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the thing with so my emotions are valuable to me, and I'm not gonna lend them to society unjustly. Like if there's like a tragic event, I can accept the fact that if it was completely true, if everything happened the way they said it did, I can accept that it's tragic without feeling the tragedy. And I would be the first one to say, well, let's not legislate based on our emotions about a tragedy, because that's not the majority of circumstance. You're taking like a 0.0001 tragedy and legislating it for 100%. That's kind of like an obscure, demented way to legislate, don't you think? Just based on the media amplification of the emotional triggers.
Oh yeah, and this says something also about journalism itself, and the lack of objectivity, and the fact that there is no call for objectivity. That if you're not emoting, there's something wrong with you. And I had this really great quote from Thomas Sowell, and he just put out a new book, which I need to get. But he talked about how emotions have nothing to do with facts. But what he said here is that there's been years of dumbed down education emphasizing on how people feel, and that this left people, it leaves people unable to see through media gimmicks. And I think it's by design. I think that we have been, as an audience, we have been educated or mal-educated in such a way that we fall prey to mainstream media propaganda. They want you to be emotional. They want you to be self-righteous. They want you to be a virtue signal. The last thing they want is objectivity, because, well, you might become a little more discerning.
Well, yeah, you're not going to jump out and vote for something based on your fresh wound of what the media told you to feel bad about.
Right, right, exactly. And of course, I'm focused these days on a lot of truthers who are still falling prey to a lot of fake body counts, and that's where it all begins, I think. When you accept the premise that an atrocity happened and it demands a response. And so I'm going for the root of this stuff. But anyway, I appreciate the call very much. We're about out of time for this evening, but definitely appreciate the call and call back anytime.
Oh, there was. I didn't even get to the topic yet. Can I make it quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Please go for it.
Okay, so one reason why I really respected Jordan Maxwell is he got into symbolism about things, and I was just going to ask your opinion on the overwhelming symbolism of the letter or symbol X. Everything is turning into X. Twitter turned into it. All the new movies, the number 10 movies are all just X. And I was just going to wonder if you've covered this before, if you've thought about it.
I have. And, okay, I'll specifically address this then. I'll address this right now after this call. And someone's asking, what's your username? Or who's the caller again? They're asking.
Oh, I don't have a username.
Okay, that's cool. I'll address the X though, and then after that, I'll probably have to terminate. But thanks again for the call.
All right. We'll catch you later.
All right, appreciate it very much. Yeah, I have to do my nightly gig. I'm gonna go do a little driving. So the X is, of course, letter 24, reverse 42, Elon Musk, space X. The X, as a glowing X over Twitter, was a repeat, I think, of Constantine seeing the glowing cross when he said, I need to unify the empire under this sign. Well, the X is going to be the Everything app, and it's about a consolidation of our new Bible, mass media, as they decide that we're going to go ahead and have to censor this for the sake of having some universal, acceptable world view. I've been describing the iPhone as the new Bible once they finish censoring the internet appropriately, and X is going to be instrumental in this. Maybe it's by destroying free speech, but it's part of the process. So X represents the empire, the unification. The cross and the dove are two symbols that you see associated with early Christianity, and this is all just a new iteration. So you see the Twitter bird, and now it's the X. And I think, again, it's a callback to the dove and the cross. Musk is Constantine rebooted, who brought us into feudalism, consolidates the Bible, consolidates an empire. Musk, the emperor of Mars. That's a big part of his big story anyway. And the whole idea of Russian cosmism is that we need to build the perfect society on Mars, which they describe as space communism. So it's interesting that the progenitor of space communism from the Russian space pioneers is a guy named Constantine. And Constantine is the guy Musk quotes when he talks about becoming a multiplanetary species. So there's two Constantines attached to this whole mission and Musk. This Russian guy and Emperor Constantine. So the X is about the consolidation of media under this new, I guess the mass media is the new world church. All right, we have to head out here, but we'll be continuing likely tomorrow, probably earlier, so we can take more calls. Thanks again for everyone who's joined us. And if you want to support the channel, definitely go to infiniteplainsociety.shop. You'll see that that's going to be really ground zero for Meatverse memes. You know, we're already on the internet, but we got to get out in the world. So there's going to be books, merchandise, stickers, tabloids. That's where the IPS Insider will be distributed. And I have something which I'll be unleashing in a couple of days here. I've been working on a series of cyborg penguins art cards, a numbered series. It's probably going to be as much as 100. And they're all going to be sold through the store, and you'll be the first to know if you're signed up and you're on the list. Anyway, this is One-Eyed Jack and the Shells, Death to the Ball. Thanks, chat. Thanks, callers. Have a great evening.
death to the law. It's death to the law we're seeking. Death to the law. Death to the law we are seeking. You're gonna lose it all. Babylon is going to fall. The beast so gone with the ball. May she rest in pieces. May she rest in pieces. We're not speeding through space or flying through the Milky Way. Not unless you are on some kick-ass drug. When the waste level's out, oceans can't curve around a ball. Stars always stay on the same course year after year. Einstein was a turd.